Introduction. Meeting my own ego. For the longest time, I thought my ego was a villain. You know, that voice in your head that always wants to be right, that whispers doubts, that flares up in arguments, or that secretly compares you to everyone else in the room. I used to see it as the enemy, this parasite that was holding me back from peace. But then, one afternoon, I had a moment that shifted everything. I was in the middle of a conversation with a close friend. We weren't fighting exactly, but there was tension in the air. I caught myself preparing a perfect comeback in my head, not because I wanted clarity, but because I wanted to win. And in that flash of awareness, I realized, my ego wasn't trying to ruin me. It was trying to protect me. Protect me from feeling small. Protect me from the sting of being wrong. Protect me from vulnerability. That realization didn't make the ego disappear, but it softened the way I saw it. And it was the beginning of a new relationship with myself. This book is written and published by Mindful Literary, but really, it's written for you, for anyone who has wrestled with the inner critic, the mask, the shadow, and wondered, is this who I really am? We'll explore what the ego is and isn't, how it takes shape, how it colors our relationships, and how it can both protect us and imprison us. But more importantly, we'll talk about what it means to live with awareness, to recognize the ego without being ruled by it, and to discover that underneath all the noise, there's something deeper, something quieter, something undeniably you. The ego is not your enemy. It's a messenger, a mirror, sometimes even a teacher. And when you learn how to listen differently, you begin to live differently. So, let's begin. Chapter 1. Understanding the ego, Foundations and Fundamentals. Defining the ego, distinguishing it from self and identity. The ego often puts on a facade, masquerading as our genuine self. This creates an intriguing dance between what we think we are and how the world perceives us. When we look in the mirror, we might see our accomplishments, social status, or opinions, but those reflections are not the essence of who we are. Instead, they form a shell around us, distorting the true self that lies underneath. The ego likes to play games. It whispers that we are defined by our successes and failures, by what others think, or by the roles we assume. It can make us believe that this identity is unchangeable, encapsulating us in a box labeled with achievements, failures, or societal expectations. This illusion of self is shaped significantly by external influences. Friends, family, and society contribute narratives that we often adopt as our own. If we receive praise for our intelligence, we might cling to the label of smart. Conversely, if we face criticism, we might internalize feelings of inadequacy. The ego feeds on these stories, crafting a perception that feels increasingly solid, yet it can be incredibly fragile. When someone challenges our identity or questions our choices, the ego can retaliate with a fierce defense, desperately attempting to protect its constructs. This heightened sensitivity often distracts us from our genuine feelings, pushing us deeper into the roles we've curated rather than revealing our authentic selves. Understanding the difference between the ego and the authentic self requires examining the stories we tell ourselves. The authentic self is more like a quiet whisper, while the ego shouts to be heard. It often uses labels, successful, failure, lovable, or unworthy, to define us, anchoring our sense of worth in what we accomplish or how we are perceived by others. By recognizing these labels for what they are, mere transient stages in our journey, we can start to untangle our identity from the ego's tight grip. As you explore the facets of your ego and self, ask yourself what stories you've inherited. What labels have you worn that no longer feel authentic? Journaling can be a powerful way to uncover these insights. Write down your thoughts about who you think you are and who you feel you truly are. This small act can provide clarity, guiding you toward a deeper, more honest relationship with yourself. The evolution of ego, from childhood to adult perspectives. From the moment we open our eyes, the world begins to whisper who we are. As children, our sense of self is like a delicate seed planted in rich soil, nourished by the stories and voices of family, the subtle cues from those around us, and the small escapes we take in play and imagination. These early experiences form the invisible lens through which we first learn to recognize ourselves, a patchwork of approval, rejection, love, and confusion that colors how we see the world and, more importantly, our place within it. What may seem like simple moments being handed a toy, sharing a smile with a parent, or overhearing a hushed argument, are threads woven deeply into the fabric of our ego's foundation. At this stage, the ego isn't yet this grand fortress defending us from the world, but more a soft clay, easily shaped by the hands, gentle or harsh, that cradle us. Attachment plays a powerful role here. When a child feels safe and seen, the ego begins to form a quiet confidence, a steady whisper saying, "I belong." On the other hand, neglect or harsh judgment can root insecurities that bloom into self-doubt and fear. The family narrative becomes a personal myth, sometimes spoken aloud through bedtime stories or carried subtly in the tone of everyday conversations, shaping how the child stitches together their inner voice. Imagine early childhood as a garden where every interaction, whether a warm hug or a critical glance, waters the ego's young shoots. Social cues, even those too complex for a child to fully grasp, seep in like sunlight or shadows, creating patterns of identity that later grow into the stories we tell ourselves about worthiness, capability, and belonging. The garden's soil isn't just the immediate family but also the broader playground of culture, community, and whispered expectations. All these layers blend, making the first self-portrait a dance of both inherited and personal colors. When you think about your own childhood, what small moments come to mind? The quiet ways your family showed affection, or the unspoken rules that shaped your sense of safety? These early experiences are not just memories but living roots that anchor your current ego, quietly influencing how you respond to challenges, love, and your own reflection in the mirror. Try this. Reflect on one early memory that made you feel seen or unseen. Notice how the emotions from that moment still ripple through your self-view today. Keeping this image in your mind helps you notice when your ego is simply replaying old tapes, giving you space to gently rewrite those stories on your own terms. As the days and years pass, the ego is no longer the soft seed but a growing structure with many rooms, corridors, and sometimes locked doors. Childhood's innocence offers a straightforward narrative, "I am who I am," unwarped by too many expectations or harsh realities. Yet, as we slowly step into adolescence and adulthood, the ego becomes more complex. It learns to wear masks, to adapt, and to negotiate with the world outside. Our stories expand, layered with social roles, cultural pressures, and personal dreams. The simple lens of childhood blurs and refocuses, creating a multifaceted architecture that holds our many selves: a professional, a friend, a lover, a hidden loner. The shift happens through countless moments, some conscious, others below the surface, as we digest new information about who we should be versus who we truly feel we are. Society, like a sculptor, chisels away with expectations about success, appearance, and behavior. Inside this sculpture, a tug-of-war unfolds between authentic desires and learned defenses. Sometimes, ego clings to old narratives, repeating the "I'm not enough" story, while at other times it challenges and reshapes itself, daring to embrace vulnerability and growth. The transformation is a story of negotiation between past and present, between the child who once needed certainty and the adult who yearns for freedom. The ego's architecture is layered with moments of rebellion, acceptance, pain, and joy, each one adding color and texture. It becomes a house both protective and sometimes confining, offering both shelter and a mirror reflecting old wounds. Consider how your own ego has changed over time. Do you notice parts of yourself that cling to childhood beliefs, and others that have been remodeled by experience and new perspective? This awareness is the first step toward gentle reconstruction, choosing which rooms to open wider and which to renovate entirely. Holding curiosity for the ego's evolution invites a kinder relationship with yourself, one that allows for growth without judgment. A simple practice to begin this process is to pause when you notice old reactions arise, perhaps an impulse to defend, compare, or hide. Ask yourself, which part of my younger self is speaking here? This question creates space between impulse and response, offering a moment where the ego can relax its grip and consider new possibilities for self-expression and self-acceptance. Psychological roots of the ego, unveiling its origins. The ego doesn't appear out of nowhere. It develops early in life, often shaped by the experiences we have as children. From the moment we're born, we're immersed in a world trying to make sense of ourselves and others. Our caregivers, whether loving or neglectful, set the stage for how we see our importance and safety. If a child learns that they are only loved when they behave a certain way, they begin to build a sense of self rooted in approval and validation. These early impressions become the blueprint for how the ego forms, an internal story about who we are, what we need, and what we must do to survive psychologically. Society plays an equally powerful role in shaping the ego's roots. From a young age, we're conditioned by cultural norms, family expectations, and peer comparisons. We learn to adopt roles that help us fit in or stand out, often at the expense of our authentic selves. For example, a child may grow up believing they must be perfect to be loved or succeed. This conditioning creates layers of identity built on approval, shame, or a need to compete. Over time, these societal messages get wired into our subconscious, subtly influencing our perceptions and even how we defend ourselves when those norms are challenged. The ego becomes a guardian of these learned identities, constantly working to maintain the sense of self it has constructed. At its core, the ego is also driven by a primal need for safety and belonging. We cling to the stories we tell about ourselves because they offer comfort in a confusing world. These stories serve as anchors in the storm of life, giving us a sense of knowing and control. Yet, this very need for security can make us resistant to change or uncomfortable with vulnerability. When the ego feels threatened or invalidated, it reacts by defending its territory, sometimes with humor, sometimes with anger, or even with withdrawal. It's almost as if the ego is a child holding tightly to a fragile security blanket, needing it to feel safe, even if that blanket is built on illusion or false perceptions. The beliefs formed early on, things like I am not enough or I must prove my worth, act like filters through which we see the world. These inner narratives influence how we interpret every comment, gesture, or setback. If the ego has learned to equate love with achievement, it will push us relentlessly to succeed, often ignoring how that pursuit drains us or disconnects us from our true feelings. Our behaviors often follow these internal stories. We might strive for approval, avoid rejection at all costs, or overcompensate to mask feelings of inadequacy. The ego also finds quiet ways to affirm itself, especially when we're not paying full attention. These subtle self-affirmations can be as simple as a quick thought like "Who do you think you are?" that chips away at our confidence, or as complex as building new defenses like superiority or cynicism. Even silence, moments where we withhold our true feelings, can serve as a way for the ego to maintain control. When we downplay our needs or avoid vulnerability, the ego's voice remains dominant, telling us that staying small or guarded is safer than risking rejection or failure. All these roots and reactions form a layered map of how we experience ourselves and others. They shape our perceptions, often creating a lens that colors every interaction. Without awareness, the ego's influence can feel like a natural part of us, whispering, persuading, reminding, yet it's actually a set of learned patterns waiting to be questioned. Recognizing these origins helps us step back and see that what we often consider our true self is actually a carefully crafted response to childhood needs and societal influences. This understanding offers a gentle opening for transformation. When we see where these roots come from, we can choose whether to cling to them or gently let them go. One practical way to start untangling these roots is to pause and notice the stories you tell yourself throughout the day. What thoughts do you lean on when feeling insecure? How do you respond to criticism? By observing without judgment, you create space to see that these reactions are not fixed aspects of your core being but patterns learned along the way. Simply recognizing this is enough to start loosening their grip, opening new avenues for authentic self-expression beyond the ego's familiar narratives. The role of the ego in daily life, functions and misconceptions. The ego serves as our internal storyteller, weaving together the narrative of who we are. It's that voice in your head that narrates your day, interpreting events and experiences through a lens shaped by your beliefs and past. When you face challenges or successes, the ego crafts a narrative that informs your self-perception. Are you the hero rising to the occasion, or are you the underdog fighting against the odds? These stories influence how you respond to situations and relate to others. Sometimes, the ego functions as a protective shield, keeping us from emotional harm. It builds walls around our feelings to guard against rejection or failure, creating a sense of safety. While this function can be beneficial, an overactive ego might lead to defensiveness or arrogance, resulting in misunderstandings in relationships. As you navigate daily life, the ego plays a role in shaping your interactions with others. How you perceive someone's words or actions often stems from your ego's interpretation. For example, if you receive constructive criticism, Your ego might scream attack and prompt a defensive response, or it might encourage self-reflection and growth. Understanding the ego as part of your consciousness can open a pathway to deeper awareness. When you realize your thoughts are often narratives spun by your ego, you can begin to distinguish between truth and the stories you tell yourself, leading to a more authentic view of reality. Many people think of the ego as purely negative, associating it with arrogance and selfishness. This view overlooks its essential role in our lives. The ego is not the enemy. It's a necessary component of our identity. It allows us to navigate the world with a sense of self and purpose. It's the part of us that dreams, aspires, and aims for success. Recognizing the ego's multifaceted nature can help shift your perception from seeing it as a villain to understanding it as a complex ally. It can encourage ambition but can also lead us astray when it seeks validation from external sources. Another misconception is the belief that the ego must be eliminated for personal growth. This view can feel daunting and even stifling. Instead of trying to banish the ego, an approach rooted in acceptance may be more beneficial. Acknowledge your ego's existence, but recognize that it doesn't have to dictate your actions and reactions. By developing self-awareness, you can observe your ego without judgment, allowing it to play its role without becoming overbearing. This balance leads to authenticity and fulfillment, enabling you to engage more genuinely with yourself and others. Instead of seeing the ego as an adversary, consider it an intricate part of the human experience, one that can stir up ambition and creativity while also causing self-doubt and insecurity. Reflecting on these dynamics invites a deeper understanding of yourself and your interactions with the world. Engage in moments of quiet reflection or journaling to uncover the patterns your ego creates. By doing this, you begin to untangle your true self from the narratives shaped by your experiences, allowing for a more profound connection with your inner being. Chapter 2. The Layers of the Ego, Seeing Beyond the Surface. Surface level, the mask we present to the world. The face we show to the world is not always the face underneath. It's a carefully assembled mask, shaped by unspoken rules and silent negotiations between who we are and who we think we ought to be. This surface self wears the patterns and colors that society expects. Smiles when we're uneasy, confidence when we're uncertain, lightness when we carry weight. Often, it's woven from threads of desire, our longing to be liked, accepted, admired. Fear also sneaks in, fear of vulnerability, of rejection, of showing cracks where the light slips through. Sometimes survival is the quiet architect of this mask, especially when we learn early that certain parts of us aren't safe to reveal. The mask becomes the costume we try on before we step into public, a performance polished over time to keep us standing securely in the gaze of others. We craft this mask without always realizing it's happening. The more the world demands certain behaviors or appearances, the thicker and more intricate the mask can become. It might be a smile formed from habit instead of joy, a laugh that moves past discomfort like a shield, or words spoken not from the heart but from the safe script of expectations. Sometimes, we forget who we are beneath the layers. The mask becomes so familiar that the edges blur, making it hard to tell where the act ends and the true self begins. We become strangers to ourselves, wearing this outer face like armor, even when it doesn't quite fit. Yet, beneath this mask lies something quieter, softer, and often overlooked, the part of us that doesn't need to perform or conform. It's a space that clings to truth even when everything else feels shaky. This space is not always loud or demanding. Sometimes it whispers in moments stolen from the noise. It might be a sudden pang of sadness that doesn't have a reason, a spark of joy that arrives without applause, or a silence that feels like coming home. Here is where our real essence stirs, untouched by the roles we play. It's the core that remembers our genuine desires, fears, and peculiarities that don't fit into tidy boxes or labels. Peeling back the layers of our mask can be a cautious journey. It asks us to stay with discomfort when the textures beneath aren't smooth or easy to recognize. The unfiltered core may hold contradictions, flaws, and strengths that don't map onto anyone else's expectations. This process can reveal wounds that have been covered for years, but also spark the first breaths of authenticity. It's not about stripping away to bear vulnerability alone. It's about discovering how much richer life can be when we allow a sneak peek, or even an open door, to the parts of ourselves we hide. The mask wasn't made to trap us, but to protect us, and now it can become a choice rather than a necessity. Imagine a child playing dress-up with an assortment of costumes. Each outfit changes how others see the child and even how the child feels while wearing it. The mask we wear as adults functions much the same way, sometimes a superhero cape, sometimes a suit of armor, or the smile hiding exhaustion beneath it all. These external layers help us navigate social worlds, but they also shape the story we tell ourselves about who we are in those moments. Recognizing this gives us power, the ability to gently loosen the grip of the facade and create space for more honest expression. Learning to recognize when we're performing and when we're simply being can shift how we relate to ourselves and others, softening boundaries that feel rigid and isolating. Ask yourself, when do I feel most like I'm wearing a mask? What parts of me am I hiding or glossing over, even if only in small ways? What moments strip away the mask without my choosing? In paying attention to these questions, you may start to recognize patterns, times or places where the mask feels heavier or lighter. This awareness isn't about judging yourself for needing to wear a mask, but inviting curiosity about what life might look like if that mask became more flexible, or even removable, in certain spaces. What parts of your true self could you allow to be seen more often? And what fears arise when you imagine that possibility? One way to gently approach this is by creating small, safe moments where you experiment with being yourself without the full weight of the mask. This might look like sharing a genuine feeling with a trusted friend, expressing an unpopular opinion with openness, or simply sitting quietly with your own thoughts without trying to polish or explain them. Notice what shifts inside when you allow these small acts of honesty. They don't have to be bold or dramatic. Sometimes the quietest reveals are the most profound. Over time, these moments can become a habit, building a bridge between the mask and the core self that feels more natural and less exhausting. Remember, the mask isn't an enemy. It's a necessary part of how we move through the world. But the gift lies in remembering that it's only one layer of us. Beneath it is a wellspring of authenticity waiting patiently, asking only for our gentle attention. The journey toward showing our true face doesn't need to dismantle everything at once. It can begin with a simple breath of awareness, a willingness to sit with what's real beneath the surface. Consider this your quiet invitation, to look behind the mask and meet yourself there, unfiltered, imperfect, and wholly worthy of being known. Inner critic and self-image, how ego shapes our inner dialogue. Imagine waking up one day and hearing a voice inside your head that never really takes a day off. It comments on everything you do, judges your choices, and whispers doubts when you're trying to stand tall. That's often how the inner critic shows up, quiet at first, like a faint background hum, but over time, it becomes a constant presence, shaping how you see yourself without you even noticing. It's less of an external voice and more of a mental echo that feels familiar because it's been there so long. This voice has a way of slipping into your thoughts naturally, making it easy to accept as part of who you are rather than recognizing it as a pattern of thinking that can be changed. The more you listen, the more it feels like the truth, your truth, especially because it's based on stories you've started to believe about yourself. It might say, "You're not good enough," or "You always mess things up," or even, "You don't matter." These statements may seem harsh, but they're actually just repeated patterns ingrained over time. They shape your self-image, turning your perception inward and coloring your view of your worth. At times, this voice can be so subtle that it feels like a natural part of your mind, not another voice at all. Yet, it influences how you respond to yourself and the world, often keeping you stuck, or convincing you that certain feelings or ideas are just who you are, rather than what you've learned or believed. The key to understanding this manifestation is recognizing how familiar it feels. Its tone can be sharp or gentle, but it's always consistent, like an old friend with a habit of pointing out what's wrong. This voice is rooted in parts of ourselves that are afraid, insecure, or trying to protect us by keeping us cautious or safe, though it often does so in ways that limit us. Its familiarity makes it hard to tell where reality ends and its influence begins, making the inner critic seem like an undeniable part of our consciousness. Once you see how often it's there, silently judging, comparing, or criticizing, you realize it's not just a random thought but a recurring storyteller, shaping the very way you see your own reflection. This inner voice isn't just noise, it's crafting stories about who we are, stories that act as a version of ourselves, sometimes comforting, but often limiting. It's as if our ego paints a picture of us based on the narratives we've collected over the years. If, for example, we've been told we're not good enough, the The voice might keep reinforcing that idea, building a mirror where flaws appear sharper and virtues fade into the background. These stories become self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping our choices and reactions. They can attach us to a sense of identity. I'm the person who always fails, or I am someone who isn't worth love, keeping us trapped in a version of ourselves that feels safe but ultimately false. At the same time, the ego loves to create a story of virtue too. It might say, I tried my best, or I'm a caring person, serving as both validation and a way to protect the fragile ego underneath. These stories help us feel anchored, giving us a sense of self that's consistent and familiar. But the problem is that many of these stories are based on partial truths or distortions. They're illusions we've built from childhood fears, comparisons, and social pressures. Once we start to recognize these stories aren't the full picture, we see how much of our self-image has been shaped by mental constructs rather than objective reality. This awareness can be liberating, offering a glimpse that the stories of flaw and virtue are just tales we've told ourselves, ripe for revision. This ego-driven construct acts like a mirror reflecting a version of ourselves that's often more dramatic than real. It's a film with exaggerated villains and heroes, making you see yourself either as the guilty one or the saint, seldom just a person trying to get by. When you notice these stories playing out, you can start to see them as stories, fabrications rather than facts. That's where real change begins, questioning the narrative, understanding it's not the entire truth, and realizing you have the power to rewrite your story. Recognizing the ego's role in shaping your self-image allows you to step back from the voices that tell you who you are, and instead, get curious about the broader, more compassionate story waiting to be written. The defensive ego, guarding against vulnerability. The defensive ego often feels like a fortress, built high and strong to protect us from the raw emotions that vulnerability brings. Think about the moments when you felt truly alive, perhaps during heartfelt conversations, artistic expression, or profound connections with others. In these moments, you're open, and while that openness can be beautiful, it also exposes us to hurt and rejection. Our defensive ego springs into action in these situations, crafting barriers to shield us from potential pain. Its intention is noble. It wants to keep us safe, but at what cost? When we rely on these defenses too heavily, we might miss out on genuine connections that make life rich and fulfilling. The protective walls erected by our ego can also lead to emotional isolation, making us feel disconnected in our closest relationships. This paradox of protection can trap us in a cycle of fear and avoidance. Understanding the delicate dance of vulnerability versus defensiveness allows us to recognize the fears that fuel our egos. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, or even fear of being truly seen can lead to an instinctive retreat into self-preservation. This battle can create a tension within us that's palpable. We want connection but feel the need to shield ourselves. Gentle awareness of this conflict is key. By pausing to observe our defensive instincts, we can slowly begin to soften those walls. This doesn't mean being foolishly open or ignoring our boundaries, but rather finding a balance where vulnerability feels safe enough to explore. Instead of reacting with defensiveness, we can practice small acts of vulnerability in our daily lives, like sharing a fear with a friend or admitting when we're wrong. These moments of honesty remind us that vulnerability is not a weakness but a bridge to deeper understanding and affection. In the journey of acknowledging our defensive ego, it's essential to approach this exploration with curiosity and compassion. Recognize when you are retreating into defensiveness. Ask yourself what's really at stake and whether that fear is as powerful as it seems. Practicing self-kindness can illuminate these patterns and allow us to choose vulnerability more often. Remember, every step you take toward openness is an act of courage, a rallying cry for connection that counters the isolation the ego can create. Embracing vulnerability opens the door to authenticity, inviting others into our world in a way that can enrich our lives beyond measure. The next time you find yourself retreating behind a wall, let it be your cue to breathe. Maybe even take a moment to reflect on how feeling exposed might lead you to unexpected, beautiful experiences. The shadow self, hidden aspects of the ego we avoid. We all carry parts of ourselves tucked away in silence, thoughts, feelings, impulses that rarely see the light of day. These hidden aspects, often called the shadow self, are like the quiet rhythm lurking in a piece of music, pulsing beneath the melody we show to the world. They aren't what we proudly display or consciously acknowledge, but they shape the beat of our psychological life nonetheless. Maybe it's that moment of jealousy toward a friend's success, the rush of anger we deny, or the fear that curls quietly beneath confident words. The shadow is composed of all those traits and desires we've pushed aside because they don't fit the image we want to wear or because they stir discomfort that we'd rather avoid. The shadow isn't just dark or negative, it's a hidden reservoir of parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, unlovable, or shameful. Carl Jung described it as the unknown dark side of the personality, not because it is evil, but because it remains unseen. This silence doesn't come from emptiness but from an unspoken refusal to look inward, like turning your back on a room that holds something you'd rather not face. The shadow hides in plain sight. It whispers through slips of the tongue, recurring patterns in our relationships, or sudden waves of emotion that seem to come from nowhere. Recognizing it is like hearing that underlying rhythm for the first time, not always easy to grasp, but impossible to ignore once you notice it. Imagine your ego as a carefully dressed host at a party, balancing politeness, charm, and control, while the shadow waits in the back room, awkward and uninvited, holding the parts you're not ready for others to meet. This hidden self influences your mood and decisions, subtly shaping what you reject or embrace in yourself and others. Though we tend to push it further into the dark, the shadow's energy never truly disappears. It finds small cracks to seep through, surprising us when least expected. Learning to listen to these whispers is like tuning in to the deeper rhythm beneath the surface noise. It's the pulse that reminds us we are bigger, messier, and more layered than the comfortable stories we tell ourselves. Even though we avoid the shadow, it influences us every day, often in ways we don't immediately recognize. When anger flares too quickly, when jealousy gnaws at a friendship, or when shame silences us, the shadow is at work. It shows up as a kind of internal resistance, an invisible hand guiding patterns and habits we wish we could change without quite knowing why. By ignoring it, we give it unseen power, allowing it to shape relationships, decisions, and self-image in stealthy, sometimes destructive ways. Accepting that these darker parts are part of our whole self opens the door to a deeper understanding of who we are. Recognition brings the shadow from the corners of the mind into the light, reducing its ability to control us unconsciously. This awareness acts as a bridge over the gap between rigidity and flexibility in our identities, allowing us to hold both strength and vulnerability at once. As this hidden self moves from enemy to companion, it softens our judgment of ourselves and others, cultivating compassion rooted in recognizing our shared imperfections. When we see that everyone wrestles with a shadow side, it becomes easier to release unrealistic expectations and harsh self-criticism. For example, noticing your irritation with someone's behavior may reveal something about your own unacknowledged frustration or insecurity. Rather than blaming others, shining a light on these reflexive responses helps turn confusion into clarity. In this way, the shadow becomes a teacher, inviting curiosity instead of fear. It nudges us toward a richer, more honest relationship with ourselves, one that includes acceptance of what we've kept hidden away. The practice of befriending your shadow is both grounding and freeing, like discovering an old friend who knows your scars and still offers a steady hand. One small way to begin is to pause when strong emotions arise and ask what that feeling might be covering or pointing to beneath the surface. With gentle attention, the shadow gradually becomes less intimidating and more like a guide in disguise. This practice doesn't erase flaws, but it allows healing by bringing fragmented parts into a coherent whole. Gradually, you can move from hiding your shadow to living with a fuller sense of unity, kindness, and inner peace, where even the quietest rhythm finds its place in the song of your life. Chapter 3. The Ego and Identity, Navigating the Personal and the Universal. Constructing identity, the narrative we tell ourselves. Every person carries a story about who they are. These stories aren't just random thoughts, they are carefully woven narratives built from moments, memories, and interpretations. From childhood to today, each experience is like a thread that adds to the fabric of our self-image. Sometimes, we stitch together ideas of being strong or weak, capable or flawed, based on what we've been told or how we've interpreted events. Over time, these stories feel so real that they shape how we see ourselves and the world, almost like a lens through which everything is filtered. The stories we tell ourselves tend to serve a purpose. They help us make sense of life, giving order and meaning to what often feels unpredictable. For example, if you grew up feeling like you always had to prove yourself, that narrative might push you to work hard but also make you judge yourself harshly. Or if you've experienced failure, your story might revolve around being unlucky or not talented enough. These stories act like personal scripts, guiding our choices, reactions, and even how we view our potential. The challenge lies in recognizing how flexible or fixed these stories are. Sometimes they serve us well, but other times, they box us in. Creating our self-narratives isn't a calculated act, but rather a subconscious process. Our brains are wired to find patterns, to seek coherence in our experiences. So, when we face setbacks, our mind might spin a story that we are destined to fail, which then becomes a belief we hold about ourselves. Likewise, positive memories might reinforce ideas of being capable and resilient. This storytelling is ongoing. Every new experience adds to the story, altering its shape. The stories become part of our identity, much like an autobiography we've written for ourselves, whether fully aware of it or not. Our inner stories act like armor, shielding us from vulnerability. They offer a sense of stability when life feels uncertain. If you see yourself as someone who has always been resilient, that identity can bolster confidence during tough times. But these stories can also become mirrors that trap us, reflecting a version of ourselves that might not be true or helpful. For instance, believing you are somehow inherently unlovable can restrict your willingness to open up and find meaningful connections. In this way, the stories we hold can either free us to grow or keep us stuck in old patterns just because they feel familiar or safe. It's worth noticing how often we cling to these stories because of the comfort they bring, even if they cause pain or limitation. Recognizing that they are stories, not absolute truths, opens the door to questioning and reshaping them. When we become aware of the narratives that run in the background of our minds, we start to see the ways they influence decisions and reactions. With practice, we can begin to challenge the stories that no longer serve us or that keep us confined, choosing instead to rewrite parts of our inner script. This process isn't about denying our past, but rather about seeing it from a different angle and giving ourselves permission to tell a different story moving forward. Practicing mindfulness helps create space for seeing these stories clearly. Asking ourselves questions like, is this story still true? Or what if I told myself a different version? Can gradually loosen the grip of limiting beliefs. Writing down our stories, then deliberately rewriting or reframing them, provides a tangible way to shift our inner narrative. Over time, this awareness allows us to choose stories rooted in possibility rather than fear or restriction, fostering a sense of agency in shaping our identity. Remember, the stories that define us are not fixed. They are always open to revision. When we pay attention to the stories we tell ourselves, we clarify what is ours and what might be borrowed or inherited from others' expectations. We realize that many of our narratives are not carved in stone but are echoes of past voices, societal messages, or even self-made myths. Listening closely reveals which stories have become unhelpful or outdated, and which ones nourish our growth. By becoming the author of our inner stories, we slowly but surely steer our narrative toward authenticity and freedom, creating a sense of self aligned with who we truly are rather than who we've been told to be. One simple yet powerful step is to start noticing the stories that come up during the day. When you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this, or I'm not enough, pause and ask, is that really true? Or where did I learn that? This gentle questioning introduces a moment of choice, whether to accept that story or replace it with a more compassionate or realistic one. Over time, these small shifts accumulate, rewiring your inner landscape. Remember, your stories shape your world, but you hold the pen. Choosing which chapters to write next gives you the power to craft a more uplifting narrative about yourself. The illusion of separation, ego's role in feeling isolated. The ego serves as a lens through which we perceive ourselves and the world around us. It often highlights our differences, creating a self-image that feels separate from the fabric of existence. Think of the ego as a filter, prompting us to categorize and compare ourselves to others. This leads to an internal dialogue that emphasizes individuality over our shared nature. While the ego can sometimes serve practical purposes, like helping us navigate social situations or assert our identity, it often magnifies feelings of isolation. We begin to identify ourselves by our possessions, achievements, and opinions, placing barriers between ourselves and others. This false sense of individuality can make us forget that we're all part of a much larger whole, connected by threads of existence that tie us together. Practicing mindfulness can help us nurture this awareness. Simple actions, like taking a moment to appreciate the smiling face of a stranger or striking up a conversation with someone in line, can remind us of our interconnectedness. Each small step towards connection chips away at the sense of separation that the ego reinforces. It's here, in this conscious engagement, that we find the threads of community, acceptance, and love that weave through the human experience. Ego and cultural conditioning: how society shapes our self-perception. From the moment we take our first breath, we begin absorbing the world around us. Not just sights and sounds, but invisible rules and stories that slowly stitch themselves into the fabric of who we think we are. These are the shared beliefs whispered through generations, tucked into bedtime tales, lessons in school, and the expectations hanging in the air like unspoken contracts. Our ego, often imagined as the I standing firmly inside us, is far less an isolated island than a mirror reflecting the culture we live in. It isn't only our private voice, it is also the echo of society's values and biases, the collection of shoulds and oughts that guide our choices and shape our identity without us even realizing. This shaping happens quietly, through the smaller moments where we nod along to what is admired or reject what is frowned upon, building a sense of self that feels deeply personal yet is curiously entwined with the invisible scripts around us. Our sense of self often feels like a solid core, yet it is more like a clay sculpture shaped by hands we barely see. For example, consider how notions of success differ across cultures. Where one society might prize individual achievement and assertiveness, another might honor harmony and collective well-being. These varying ideals subtly steer the ego, making certain traits feel right or wrong. When growing up, we imitate the figures around us who represent these ideals, adopting mannerisms, preferences, even fears. The idea of self becomes a complex mosaic of cultural messages, filtered through family, media, community, religion, and language. Sometimes these influences feel like invisible threads pulling us toward roles we didn't choose. They whisper stories about who we should be, acceptable jobs, behaviors, emotions, even the shape and color of our bodies, that we internalize as truths about ourselves. And because these stories are shared, believing them often feels like belonging, the ego's attempt to fit in and find safety in similarity. Despite its quiet power, this cultural conditioning is rarely recognized by the ego as conditioning at all. Instead, it masquerades as the natural self, and any questioning can feel like a betrayal or a threat. It's like living inside a painted room where the walls are the borders of identity drawn by collective agreement. These walls limit how freely the self can breathe, nudging us toward conformity and away from the wild, messy freedom of authentic individuality. When the ego clings tightly to these inherited images, it can create tension, frustration, or a sense of being trapped, emotions that ripple beneath the surface of everyday life. Understanding that the I we defend so fiercely is partly someone else's portrait in disguise opens the possibility of change, showing the ego not as a fixed fortress but a place to visit and rearrange. Recognizing the invisible threads that shape our ego starts with noticing the moments when we feel small or constrained, or when our reactions surprise us with their intensity. These emotional triggers often mark where cultural expectations press hardest on our sense of self. Observing the stories playing in our mind, like needing approval, fearing failure, or avoiding shame, can reveal how much is borrowed from external voices rather than originating inside. Reflect for a moment on how much of your daily self-talk echoes phrases you heard growing up or messages broadcast by society. This awareness doesn't ask you to reject everything but invites a gentle inquiry. Which parts of my sense of self feel truly mine, and which feel like layers added to please others or fit norms? Understanding where cultural conditioning comes from can show these layers as separate from your essence rather than defining it. Tracing these influences back, we see that much of cultural conditioning is woven through family traditions, education systems, and dominant social narratives shaped by history and power. For example, the beliefs about gender roles that many inherit come from centuries of cultural storytelling reinforced by laws, religion, and media. Unpacking these origins can feel like peeling bark off a tree to find the living wood beneath. It's a process that asks for curiosity and patience, as well as compassion, because these layers are not just external pressures, they are often strategies our psyche created to survive and belong. This untangling process isn't about shutting down the ego but about loosening the grip of inherited identity, allowing space for the self to expand in new directions beyond cultural scripts. Gently stepping away from cultural conditioning means creating moments when you can listen to the quieter, less familiar parts of yourself. This might look like questioning long-held beliefs in solitude, journaling thoughts that feel uncomfortable, or practicing small acts of rebellion against unspoken rules. A conversation where you express your true feelings, a choice that defies expectations, or simply allowing yourself to feel without judgment what culture taught you to hide. Sometimes this feels like waking up from a deep dream, wondering how much of what you thought was you was really just a collective illusion. Yet, this awakening opens room for creativity, authenticity, and freedom, inviting the ego to become a more flexible companion on your path rather than a rigid dictator. Discovering who you are beyond these cultural layers is less about rejecting society and more about reclaiming your voice within it. One practical way to start loosening cultural constraints is by paying attention to recurring patterns in your thinking and behavior. When you notice a harsh inner critic or a panic about judgment, pause and ask yourself, whose voice is this? Does this belief serve me or limit me? This simple question can illuminate many hidden cultural influences. You might find that some of your fears or desires trace back to childhood teachings or societal expectations that no longer fit your life. From there, try experimenting with new ways of seeing yourself and interacting with the world, even if only in small ways at first. This can be as accessible as choosing to honor a preference that feels natural but was always discouraged, or as profound as slowly reshaping your identity through new experiences and relationships. The key is kindness toward yourself, a recognition that shedding cultural conditioning is a process, not a quick fix. Here's something to carry gently in your pocket. Your ego is not the sum of all you've been told to be, but a fluid story waiting for you to write it with your own hands. It's okay to question, shift, and rewrite the script as much as you need. Listening to the quiet voice beneath the noise of culture brings you closer to a version of yourself that feels lighter, freer, and maybe even a little bit wild, perfectly imperfect and ever-growing. If you begin by noticing a single thought or habit tied to cultural pressure, you've taken the first step on a path that leads not away from who you are, but deeper into your true, unfolding self. Balancing personal identity with universal connection. Imagine a single thread woven into a grand, sprawling quilt. Each of us contributes one unique strand, telling stories of who we are, what we love, what we fear, and where we come from. These stories form the core of our identity, anchoring us in a sense of self that feels solid and familiar. Yet, in the larger picture, every thread, no matter how distinct, is part of a shared cloth that reaches across borders, cultures, and generations. Our roles, such as being a parent, artist, friend, or worker, add layers to this tapestry. They shape how we see ourselves and influence how we relate to others. These roles can sometimes feel like a cage or a crown, grounding us or confining us depending on how tightly we cling to them. Behind all these stories and roles lies something even bigger, the idea that our individual identity is both separate and interconnected with everything around us. Taking a step back from our daily routines, we can see how personal experiences blend into a broader universe. Our joys and sorrows, achievements and struggles are like ripples in a vast pond. Each ripple may seem small, but together they form waves that connect all consciousness. Recognizing this shared flow can help us understand that our sense of self is not just a fixed point but part of a flowing, living web of energy, intuition, and connection. This awareness doesn't diminish our individuality. Instead, it offers the possibility of seeing ourselves not as isolated islands but as stories that are woven into a larger, infinite fabric. Our personal identities become more vibrant when we embrace their relation to the greater whole, acknowledging that while we are unique, we are also threads connecting us all in a common mosaic. Sometimes, the best way to feel the immense interconnectedness is through simple, gentle shifts in perspective. Instead of thinking of ourselves as separate from everything else, we can start noticing how our most intimate moments mirror the universe's rhythm. A quiet breath, a moment of kindness, a burst of creativity, all of these are small acts that link us not just to ourselves but to the world around us. One way to foster this broader view is by consciously reminding ourselves that our happiness, fears, and struggles are shared experiences. We can practice looking at others and seeing reflections of ourselves, a smile, a tear, a silent hope. These moments gently dissolve the walls that sometimes feel like barriers, replacing them with a sense of belonging in the universal flow. Another practice involves noticing how we identify with our roles, being a worker, a parent, or a dreamer. without letting those labels define our entire existence. Instead, we can see these roles as aspects of a greater self that is constantly evolving and connected. When we shift from seeing ourselves solely through the lens of these labels, we open space for compassion, for ourselves and others, to flourish. Trying on this broader perspective isn't about abandoning what makes us unique. It's about embracing the full spectrum of our identity, our quirks, passions, and memories, while gently recognizing that we are part of an endless, interconnected dance. So, as you go about your day, practice a small act of acknowledgement. Pause and deeply feel the quiet truth that your story is woven into the story of everything else. Seeing yourself as part of a larger whole doesn't lessen who you are. It expands who you can become. Chapter 4. The Psychological Mechanics of Ego Defense. Projection and Blame. Externalizing Inner Conflicts. Projection occurs when we attribute our own feelings, thoughts, or behaviors to someone else. This psychological mechanism is a way for us to distance ourselves from uncomfortable emotions. For instance, a person who struggles with anger might accuse a friend of being irritable. By projecting these feelings, we avoid facing our own issues and instead focus on perceived flaws in others. This act can shield us from vulnerability, as it allows us to maintain our self-image and avoids direct confrontation with our inner conflicts. In many cases, projection serves as a protective shield. Imagine sitting in a cafe and overhearing a conversation. A loud couple nearby bickers openly, and you find yourself judging them for their volume. But what if that loudness reminds you of your own struggles to communicate? Rather than acknowledging your discomfort, your mind shifts the focus. You see their relationship as the problem. It's easier to criticize others than to examine our own emotions or vulnerabilities. Recognizing when we project can lead to deeper self-awareness. During moments of judgment, pause and ask yourself, what does this reveal about me? Such reflections can illuminate shadows within. This journey inward may uncover fears, insecurities, or unresolved conflicts we have avoided. Understanding projection and where it stems from can foster empathy toward ourselves and others. Instead of seeing flaws in those around us, we may begin to see connections and shared humanity. Blame acts like a safety valve, allowing us to release pent-up emotions without addressing the root causes of our discomfort. When things go wrong, it feels much simpler to point fingers than to take accountability. For example, if we perform poorly at work, it's easy to blame colleagues or circumstances rather than examining our own actions or decisions. This externalization serves as a way to protect our self-worth and avoid uncomfortable introspection. Unfolding this blame can reveal a pattern of fear and inadequacy. When we feel threatened or insecure, projecting blame onto others gives us a temporary sense of control. This might look like a parent who faults teachers for their child's struggles, rather than considering their own involvement. In doing so, they preserve a self-image of being a competent caregiver while sidestepping their potential shortcomings. By recognizing blame as a natural defense mechanism, we can create pathways for self-growth. Start small. When something goes awry, instead of blaming, ask yourself what you could have done differently. This shift not only fosters personal accountability but can also improve relationships. Embracing our part in life's challenges may feel intimidating at first, but it can cultivate resilience and deeper connections with others. Engaging with our inner conflicts rather than externalizing them might open doors to self-discovery and personal growth. By gently challenging ourselves during moments of blame, we take the first step toward awareness, fostering both introspection and self-acceptance, nurturing a profound understanding of who we truly are. Rationalization. Justifying uncomfortable feelings. Imagine someone who insists their choices were perfect, their decisions flawless, even as a quiet, nagging voice inside whispers otherwise. Maybe they bought an expensive gadget that didn't quite live up to the hype, but instead of admitting the purchase felt impulsive or wasteful, they tell themselves it was an investment or a deserved reward. That gentle tug of doubt lingers beneath their polished explanation, quietly asking for attention. This push and pull between what we feel and what we tell ourselves is the dance of rationalization, where uncomfortable feelings find shelter behind carefully constructed stories. It's the mind's way of keeping us comfortable in moments that might otherwise stir vulnerability or self-doubt. Our minds have an extraordinary ability to weave stories that soften the edges of discomfort. When feelings like regret, guilt, or fear creep in, The brain doesn't like to sit with that kind of unease. Instead, it sets about crafting explanations that feel safer, more acceptable, or even flattering. Rationalization is the storyteller of the psyche, saving face when the truth seems too raw or threatening. It's why someone might say, "I didn't get that job because the company wasn't the right fit," not simply because they didn't make the cut. These comforting stories act like emotional armor, shielding us from the vulnerability that comes with admitting mistakes, failure, or regret. Interestingly, this protective mechanism can be both a gift and a trap, reaching for balance between honesty and emotional survival. Think of rationalization as the mind's gentle smoothing out of a rocky surface. When an experience feels uncomfortable or doesn't align with our self-image, it nudges us to see it from a different angle, one that feels less threatening. Yet, beneath these crafted narratives, the original feelings persist, waiting patiently to be recognized. This is why rationalization can feel both reassuring and frustrating. It's reassuring because it helps us keep moving forward without breaking down under the weight of uncomfortable truths. It's frustrating because it often leaves the deeper feelings just out of reach, making true understanding and growth harder to grasp. Our minds are not trying to deceive us with ill intent. They are trying to hold space for us in moments where raw honesty might feel unbearable. Have you ever caught yourself explaining away a choice or reaction before you even had time to reflect? Maybe after a heated argument, you quickly tell yourself, "They just misunderstood me," or after procrastinating, you say, "I work better under pressure." These thoughts are less about convincing others and more about soothing your own inner turmoil. They reveal a tender part of ourselves that longs for acceptance, even from within. Recognizing this dynamic offers a chance to pause and gently ask, what is the feeling beneath the story my mind is telling? What vulnerability am I protecting right now with these justifications? By tuning into this question, we invite curiosity instead of judgment, opening a window to feelings that often go unspoken because they seem too uncomfortable to hold. Bringing this into everyday life means gently noticing when you're explaining why something is not so bad or actually makes sense when beneath it, a quiet discomfort simmers. Rather than pushing away these feelings with quick stories, try giving yourself permission to simply acknowledge them. Maybe write down the rationalizations you tell yourself and then sit quietly with the underlying emotions. Ask yourself what message those feelings have for you. Are they signaling regret, fear, insecurity, or unmet needs? Practicing this kind of mindful reflection can help loosen the grip of automatic rationalizations, allowing a truer conversation between your thoughts and feelings to emerge. Over time, this habit invites greater self-awareness and emotional honesty without judgment or hurry. One practical way to approach this is to create a mental pause when you notice an urge to justify something uncomfortable. Take a breath and silently acknowledge the story your mind is telling. Then, ask, what feeling am I avoiding by telling this story? Or how might I accept this discomfort without needing to justify it right away? This simple shift invites the part of you that's been quietly pushed aside to step forward, not as something to be fixed or dismissed, but as a messenger carrying important truth. Holding space for these feelings can be like gently unfolding a paper crane, delicate, valuable, and revealing new shape and meaning with each thoughtful movement. Denial and repression, suppressing unwanted aspects. Our minds often act like skilled gatekeepers, creating layers of defense to protect us from emotional pain. These defenses, known as denial and repression, are natural responses that help keep unsettling truths tucked away out of sight. Imagine a small child who witnesses something overwhelming, perhaps a fight or a loss, and instinctively brushes it aside, pretending it never happened. That act of ignoring painful reality is quite similar to how denial works in our adult minds. Repression, on the other hand, is like quietly burying difficult memories deep within, so they don't surface to disturb our daily peace. These mechanisms aren't something we choose consciously. They come automatically, serving as silent shields that keep us safe from emotional discomfort. It's as if our inner world has its own set of filters, designed to hide what feels too heavy to hold, giving us a chance to carry on with a sense of stability. Denial and repression work quietly but powerfully, shaping the way we experience ourselves and the world. When we deny something, we convince ourselves that it isn't real or isn't important, even if evidence is staring us right in the face. Think of someone who refuses to accept a serious health diagnosis. They focus only on optimistic reports to avoid confronting fear. Repression often manifests more subtly. It's the mental equivalent of locking away memories that could provoke shame, guilt, or deep sadness. Over time, these unacknowledged parts of ourselves can affect our moods, choices, and relationships. We might act as if everything is fine because we aren't aware of the true weight we're carrying inside. The more we suppress, the more our internal world becomes like a locked cabinet, containing fragments of truths we're too scared or unwilling to face directly. This automatic suppression isn't just a flaw or a sign of weakness. It's an age-old survival strategy, woven into the fabric of human psychology. It helps us maintain a sense of control when things seem overwhelming, or when confronting painful realities might break us down. Many times, denial and repression are driven by fear, the fear of loss, rejection, or pain so overwhelming that acknowledging it feels like risking everything. This fear leads us to cling to illusions or to bury our feelings beneath layers of distraction. The challenge then becomes recognizing these defenses without judgment, understanding that they are part of a natural effort to protect us, even if they sometimes prevent growth or healing. Becoming aware of these mechanisms is like turning on a light in a dark room, revealing spaces that were hidden but long to be understood. Gently noticing these patterns can start shifting our relationship with ourselves. It's about understanding that denial and repression aren't flaws but signs that our inner system is trying to keep us safe. When we allow ourselves to see dark or painful truths without rushing to dismiss or hide them, we open the door to authentic healing. Perhaps a small step is simply noticing when you're avoiding a difficult emotion or rationalizing away a truth that feels uncomfortable. Giving yourself permission to acknowledge what's there, instead of pushing it aside, creates space for genuine change. Silence can no longer be your only refuge. Instead, you begin to listen with compassion to what has long remained hidden, gently inviting those repressed parts into the light where they can be understood, cared for, and eventually released. Sometimes, the key lies in recognizing that what we suppress is often a whisper from ourselves, a message that something needs attention. Small, honest moments of curiosity, like asking, "What am I truly feeling right now?" can slowly unravel the layers of denial and repression. Practice mindfulness, not to judge your defenses but to witness them with gentle clarity. Over time, this awareness can transform what once seemed utterly hidden into parts of our story that no longer threaten our sense of safety. Instead of fighting the parts we've buried, we begin to gently coexist with them, making space for true understanding to emerge from within. As we do, healing becomes less about curing symptoms and more about embracing the full complexity of being human, flawed, vulnerable, and wonderfully resilient. The role of ego in maintaining psychological stability. The ego acts like a protective barrier, forming a mental fortress that allows us to navigate the unpredictability of life. Imagine standing in the middle of a chaotic storm, with wind howling and rain pelting down. The ego helps us create a sheltered space, providing a sense of stability amidst the turmoil. By constructing this fortress, we can distance ourselves from the overwhelming nature of our emotions and external circumstances. It gives us a point of reference, a foundation to feel safe and secure, where we can process the chaos without being engulfed by it. This protective aspect of the ego is particularly significant when we face challenges that can feel threatening or exhausting. The moment life throws something unexpected our way, loss, failure, rejection, the ego steps in to stabilize our perception and self-worth. This stabilization is crucial because it allows us to maintain a certain level of confidence, helping us manage feelings of anxiety or inadequacy. Without this fortress, we'd likely be swept away by feelings of vulnerability, feeling lost in the tumult of life's ups and downs. Many tools help the ego defend this sacred space. Denial, for example, allows us to avoid confronting uncomfortable truths. It's a bit like putting on blinders. By refusing to acknowledge certain aspects of reality, we can avoid the feelings of pain or chaos that come with them. But this isn't merely avoidance. Denial serves to keep us stable and focused on the immediate, even if at a cost to our growth. Then there's projection, which can seem more complex at first glance. When we project, we take our own unwelcome feelings and attributes and attribute them to others. This process can temporarily alleviate internal discord, allowing us to maintain a positive self-image while keeping uncomfortable truths about ourselves at bay. It's like shining a flashlight onto others rather than facing the shadows within ourselves. Rationalization helps as well. This defense mechanism involves fabricating excuses or justifications that ease our emotional burdens. When something doesn't go as planned, Instead of feeling defeated, we might tell ourselves it was meant to happen that way or that we never truly wanted it in the first place. This mental trick keeps our self-esteem intact and serves as a gentle cushion against the harshness of failure. These defenses are indeed intricate interplays of the ego, all designed to maintain balance in a world that can often feel overwhelming. The role of the ego may seem paradoxical at times. It shields us while simultaneously hindering our growth. But understanding these mechanisms allows for self-awareness and a degree of compassion toward ourselves. Engaging in self-reflection and examining how these defenses show up in our lives can lead to more personal growth. While the ego's fortress may initially feel secure, recognizing when it becomes a prison can open doors to deeper understanding and emotional resilience. Fostering this awareness nurtures the essence of who we are and can guide us toward healthier ways of coping with life's challenges. Consider taking a moment to observe your own ego's defenses. When faced with stress or emotional turmoil, how do you respond? Identifying these patterns is the first step toward transforming your relationship with yourself and finding more grace in your life's journey. This mindfulness can create a softer, more resilient approach to life, allowing both strength and vulnerability to coexist harmoniously. Chapter 5. The Spiritual Perspective on the Ego. Ego in different spiritual traditions. A comparative view. Across the vast diversity of spiritual traditions, the ego often surfaces as a central topic, yet the way it is perceived and understood shifts subtly from one path to another. Sometimes the ego is painted as a shadowy barrier, a fortress built around the self that blinds us to deeper truths. In other cases, it is more like a wayward child needing guidance, something not to be destroyed but gently transformed. In Hindu philosophy, for instance, the ego is referred to as a hankarar, the sense of I-ness or individuality. It is the voice that insists on separateness, the small self clinging to identity and form. The ultimate spiritual goal there is to quiet this ahankara, allowing the true self, or Atman, to shine forth beyond the clouds of separation. In Buddhism, the ego, or self, is even more critically examined. It is often described as an illusion, the product of clinging to transient experiences and thoughts that give a false impression of a permanent I. The Buddha's teachings emphasize the notion of anatta, or no self, which encourages practitioners to see through the ego's layers and recognize the emptiness of fixed identity. This isn't about annihilation but rather about freeing oneself from the suffering that comes when the ego holds too tightly to existence, craving, or aversion. The ego's grasping is seen as the root of dissatisfaction which meditation and insight try to loosen. On the other hand, within the Sufi tradition of Islam, the ego, or nafs, is understood as a restless and often troublesome aspect of the self that pulls one away from divine unity. Yet the story isn't one of simple rejection. Sufis talk about taming the nafs through spiritual practices that refine and elevate the soul. The ego is something to be tamed much like a wild horse, not destroyed, but made a loyal companion to spiritual progress. This gives a beautiful nuance. The ego is not the enemy but a part of the self that requires careful attention and care to become a gateway, rather than a wall, to the divine. In the Western mystical tradition, notably in Christian mysticism, the ego is often equated with the sinful self, or the false self that needs to surrender to God's will. Saints like John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila describe a process of dying to the self in order to arise in a deeper union with God. Though it can sound severe, it's less about harsh self-denial and more about stepping beyond the narrow confines of personal ego into a more expansive, loving presence. The ego's attachments to pride, fear, and desire dissolve, not through annihilation but through love and surrender. There, the ego is a stage in a journey where self-centeredness is softened into selflessness. When we consider indigenous spiritual voices, the ego often takes a different shape. In many native cosmologies, the self is not an isolated entity but part of a vast web that includes ancestors, animals, spirits, and the earth itself. The ego here may be less about a psychological structure and more about how an individual relates within that community and the larger living system. Ego can become a form of imbalance, a separation from the collective and the natural world, that needs healing through ritual, storytelling, and reconnect with nature. Across these glimpses, what stands out is how the ego is never simply bad or good. It is a reflection of human identity, with all its complexities and contradictions. Whether seen as an illusion to pierce, a beast to tame, or a self to transcend, Each tradition invites a careful relationship to this familiar and often misunderstood companion. Reflecting on these perspectives together reveals surprising parallels. Many traditions agree that the ego's tight grip fosters suffering, isolation, and misunderstanding of who we truly are. Spiritual practices almost always aim to loosen this grip, whether by quieting, transforming, surrendering, or expanding the sense of self beyond egoic limits. Yet where they differ, they offer unique ways to engage, some with fierce discipline, some with gentle compassion, some with playful reverence. These differences show us that the ego isn't a one-size-fits-all problem but a living puzzle, which we each approach through the language and tools our spirit resonates with. This comparison invites personal reflection. How does my view of myself echo these global teachings? In what ways might I be holding too tightly to an identity that limits me? What if the ego could be more like a curious child or a wild friend, needing guidance but not rejection? These questions can spark a softening, a willingness to see ego not just as a foe but as a doorway to greater self-awareness. When you allow yourself to meet the ego with kindness rather than fear, the spiritual journey becomes less a battle and more a dance. One practical way to work with these insights is to practice watching the ego in action. Notice when it pushes back, demands attention, or creates stories about who you are and aren't. Instead of fighting or attaching, simply observe. Over time, this creates space between I and the thoughts or feelings claiming to be me. It's like stepping back from a painting to see the whole image rather than fixating on a single brushstroke. Another practice is to engage in rituals of letting go. This could be through journaling fears and then releasing them, or through meditation focusing on the breath as a gentle reminder of presence beyond identity. Slowly, the ego softens its grip, not by force, but through the simple act of presence and curiosity. Consider this. What if the ego isn't just a hurdle but a teacher waiting patiently for you to listen? What stories might it tell if you leaned in without judgment? Sometimes, the quiet moments when ego loosens feel like stepping into a vast sky after being trapped in a tiny room for too long. Hold that space gently, like a precious gift being unwrapped, and you begin to understand the beautiful complexity of what it means to be fully human, both limited and infinite, both fragmented and whole. The ego will always be part of this dance, but it need not be the lead. The ego as illusion, awakening to transcendence. Imagine the ego as a delicate mirage dancing gently on the horizon, shimmering in the distance. It appears as a solid presence, a sense of I with form, identity, and control, but it's really more like a flickering illusion, constantly shifting and fading whenever you try to hold on to it. We often spend years chasing after this mirage, believing that it defines us, that it holds the key to happiness or success. Yet, the more we cling to the idea of me, the more distant that sense becomes, always just out of reach, teasing us with a promise of permanence that never materializes. It's as if we're trying to grasp water, fearing the loss, craving more, yet unable to truly hold what is fundamentally fleeting. This illusion has a comforting appeal, too. It offers a sense of security amidst chaos, creating a story about who we are and what we control. We think that if we can just perfect our persona or win approval, we'll finally feel at home. But underneath, the whole construct is a fragile facade, built on shifting sands. Recognizing it as a mere illusion can feel unsettling at first, because we've been so identified with our stories, our roles, and our desires. When awakening begins and we see the ego's ephemeral nature, it's like waking from a long, elaborate dream. Suddenly, the boundaries we thought defined us break apart, revealing an expansive, unchanging awareness beyond the personal story. This awakening isn't about destroying the ego but about seeing through its illusion. It's like realizing that the mirage was never real to begin with. Once this becomes clear, the chase diminishes, and something quieter emerges, an awareness that isn't caught in the illusion of separateness. The sense of individual me still exists, but it no longer carries the weight of needing to be separate or in control. Instead, it relaxes into the understanding that this sense of self is just a temporary story, a bubble that can burst anytime without losing the core of who we are. This shift allows us to step beyond the illusion of separateness into a space of timeless, boundless presence, where the ideas of I, me, and mine no longer hold all the power they once did. Practicing detachment, cultivating inner freedom. In this fast-paced life, we often feel overwhelmed, pulled by our desires, fears, and opinions that swirl around us like a chaotic stream. Practicing detachment doesn't mean becoming emotionless or disconnected. Rather, it allows us to step back, observe our thoughts and feelings, and understand that they do not define who we are. It invites us to experience life fully while retaining a sense of perspective. Like standing on the bank of that river, we can see the currents without getting swept away, allowing us to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. This practice opens up a space where we can find clarity even amid tumultuous emotions. This freedom allows us to explore our feelings without the constant fear of losing them or having them dictate our actions. We begin to see ourselves not as victims of our circumstances but as observers, gaining insights into what truly matters. This shift in perspective encourages self-reflection and conversation with ourselves, a chance to ask, what do I really want? What fears are driving my behavior? As we ponder these questions, we become equipped with the understanding that we can choose how to respond rather than simply react to life's challenges. Integrating this practice of detachment into daily life can be simple yet profound. Start by setting aside a few moments each day for quiet reflection. You might sit quietly and observe your breath or journal your thoughts without judgment, noting feelings as they come and go. This exercise can help you build a buffer between your thoughts and actions, creating space for deeper contemplation. Consider adopting a mantra or phrase that resonates with you, a reminder that you are not your thoughts, but rather the observer of them. You might find comfort in saying to yourself, I see you, but I don't have to engage. Each time you practice this, you are essentially nurturing an internal garden of peace, allowing the weeds of anxiety and fear to wither away as you cultivate seeds of awareness and self-acceptance. Remember that practicing detachment is not a destination but an ongoing journey filled with twists and turns. There will be days when your thoughts may feel overwhelming, and that's okay, it's part of being human. Just as the river continues to flow, so do your experiences and emotions. Embrace them with curiosity and compassion without judgment. As you move forward, notice that the more you engage in this practice, the greater your capacity for inner peace becomes. With each step, you nurture a sense of resilience, realizing that while life may not always go as planned, your response can be rooted in calmness and clarity. This is where your true strength lies. Ego and enlightenment, pathways to dissolution. The ego often feels like the center of our identity, the voice inside our heads reminding us who we are, what we want, and how we fit into the world. It's that constant narrator that defines our likes, dislikes, fears, and ambitions. Yet, beneath this familiar presence lies a construct shaped by countless experiences, conditioning, and survival instincts rather than a true reflection of our deeper self. The ego's craving for control and permanence naturally clashes with the spiritual longing to transcend the ordinary and touch something beyond the everyday self. In fact, the very urge to reach beyond oneself often leads us face to face with the ego's illusions, forcing us to recognize how much of what we call me is actually a fragile story built on labels and judgments. This clash between ego and spirit can feel like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. The ego wants to protect its boundaries, define who you are, and keep life predictable. But the spiritual path invites you to loosen your grip and see the fluidity beneath those boundaries. To transcend, you must first make peace with the ego's grip and confront its shadows. The fears of losing control, the hunger for validation, the discomfort with uncertainty. Only when these illusions are gently honored and allowed to unravel can the soul's deeper essence begin to peek through the cracks. Imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror that reflects all your stories, your roles, your fears, your past wounds. The image appears so real and solid, yet it is made of light and shadow, shifting with every glance. This reflection is the ego, a construct designed to meet the world with a sense of I am. But beyond that reflection lies something vast and unbound, waiting patiently to be known. The desire for transcendence isn't a rebellion against the self, but a natural unfolding to see through the ego's veil and discover that what's beneath is infinitely more alive and expansive. The journey toward enlightenment is often described as dissolving the ego, but it's more like a dance where the ego slowly loosens its tight hold rather than being suddenly erased. Enlightenment doesn't mean erasing who you are. It means understanding your ego's place and allowing it to soften its grasp. Like a wave merging back into the ocean, the ego's sharp edges blur, and its need to dominate your identity weakens. This process unfolds naturally when the heart opens enough to trust life without constant control, when silence grows thicker than the chatter of self-importance, and when presence absorbs the craving for future or past achievements. One pathway toward this weakening of egoic grip is through deep self-awareness, the practice of watching your thoughts and feelings without reacting or identifying with them. When you notice the ego's dramas, anxieties, or desires as passing clouds rather than truths, you begin to step out of their orbit. Moments of insight steadily accumulate, like tiny cracks in a shell, undermining the belief that you must protect a fixed I. Spiritual traditions often speak of surrender, but this doesn't mean giving up your life or personality. It's about surrendering the need to cling so tightly to the me that keeps you locked in separation. As the ego relaxes, space opens for the soul's true nature to shine forth, a nature that is whole, connected, and free from judgment. This shining forth is not something created. It's what was always there, waiting beneath the fortress of ego. It's like the sun hidden behind clouds. It doesn't disappear when the clouds cover it, but its power is muffled. With patience and openness, the clouded ego slowly clears, revealing a light that doesn't depend on circumstance or achievement. This light is the essence of enlightenment, a presence that simply is, beyond identity and story. Try sitting quietly and observing your thoughts for a few moments today. Notice how often the ego tries to steer your attention, demanding reassurance or defense. Instead of pushing those thoughts away, watch them with kindness and curiosity, as if you were a gentle friend. See if you can find the space just behind those thoughts, where awareness itself breathes freely without the need for labels. This simple practice, when repeated, creates the gentle weakening of the ego's hold, and step by step, invites the essence of your true self to be recognized and embraced. Chapter 6. Recognizing the ego in everyday life. Identifying ego traps in relationships and conversations. Few things sabotage honest connection more than our ego's tendency to hijack moments that should be genuine exchanges. When we enter a conversation with a need to be right, to win an argument, or to appear superior, our ego subtly turns us into judges rather than listeners. Imagine a small voice whispering in your mind, "I must be the smartest one here," or "I need to prove I'm better than this person." That voice nudges us to focus on defending ourselves or showcasing our worth rather than truly understanding the other. These impulses, often unconscious, set the stage for misunderstandings, silent resentments, or even conflicts that linger long after the words are spoken. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to keeping ego from steering the wheel of our interactions. In many daily interactions, our ego's desire to be seen as right can distort our perception of the conversation. We might find ourselves twisting facts, dismissing others' opinions outright, or feeling anxious when challenged. For example, in an argument about parenting, one might feel compelled to defend their choices at all costs, not because they believe it's the best, but because admitting fault or uncertainty threatens their sense of self. This need to be seen a certain way fuels what psychologists call ego defenses, habits that shield us from vulnerability but also block authentic connection. When we're caught up in these defenses, the true purpose of communication, understanding, shared growth, and closeness, gets lost amid the need to maintain a false image. The habit of comparing ourselves to others or feeling the need to impress can also trap us in ego-driven conversations. If you've ever felt compelled to name-drop, exaggerate your achievements, or subtly undermine someone else's success, you might be responding to that underlying urge to feel valued. These acts aren't usually about the other person or the topic at hand, but about filling a lingering sense of inadequacy or invisibility. Similarly, when conversations drift toward Me Too stories where the goal is to amplify our own importance, we risk turning dialogue into a contest of who's more impressive, not who's more genuine. Spotting these ego traps involves noticing the subtle shifts in your motives. Are you truly curious or just craving validation? Recognizing these patterns can be like shining a flashlight into a dark room. They often operate beneath the surface, subtle yet powerful. It's helpful to notice when your voice gets louder in your mind, when you feel an overly strong emotional response, or when the debate spirals into defensiveness. Sometimes, you might catch yourself thinking, "They're wrong, and I need to prove it," or "I have to be the one who's right here." These are signs that ego is taking the lead. Developing awareness means gently observing these moments without judgment, as if watching a child's game. Over time, you'll notice that just by recognizing the ego's influence, it naturally begins to loosen its grip, allowing space for more honest and open interactions. To start gently redirecting these ego patterns, try practicing pauses before responding. When you feel the urge to win or to stand out, take a deep breath and ask yourself a simple question: is this about understanding or about proving? This small shift creates a pause, a moment to check in with your deeper intent. Instead of rushing to defend your position or elevate yourself, aim to listen with genuine curiosity. Imagine you're holding a delicate glass. The more you handle it carefully, the less likely it is to shatter into misunderstandings. Over time, these little pauses become habits, transforming conversations into opportunities for real connection rather than ego battles. One practical tip is to imagine a mental boundary, like a soft but firm wall, that keeps your ego's voice from overpowering your true self. During tense moments, remind yourself, this isn't about me, it's about connection. And if you notice your mind racing to justify, compare, or defend, gently tell that part of you to step back for a moment. Practice extending empathy, not just towards others but towards yourself too. Recognize that everyone, including you, carries insecurities and fears, and that's okay. The more you acknowledge these parts of yourself, the easier it becomes to see ego's tricks and to choose honesty and openness over the need to be right or seen as special. Noticing ego-driven reactions and triggers. Picture a moment in your day when irritation or defensiveness suddenly bubbled up within you, almost out of nowhere. Perhaps it was a comment from a colleague that struck a nerve, or maybe it was a simple miscommunication with a friend. Whatever the scenario, it felt like a bright spotlight had turned on, illuminating the lurking whispers of your ego. It's as if a familiar scene turned suddenly dramatic, revealing an unseen layer of your reactions. Those moments can feel disorienting, yet they hold immense potential for understanding ourselves more deeply. When you notice that irritation, take a breath and pause. Instead of rushing to react, let's switch gears and examine those feelings with a gentle curiosity. This isn't about self-judgment or beating yourself up. Rather, it's an opportunity to recognize that these responses often signal something deeper. Ego often reacts quickly, wanting to protect or defend. Identify what those triggers might be. Are they tied to past experiences? Do they connect to values you hold dear? Observing with kindness opens the door to understand what lies beneath the surface. Recognizing these emotions can be like finding breadcrumbs that lead you back to an inner landscape that's rich with insights. With practice, you can transform those triggered moments into stepping stones for personal growth. Reflect on how your ego may feel threatened in certain situations, and consider the needs that may be driving those reactions. By shifting your focus from the immediate emotion to the underlying feelings, you pave the way for a deeper, more compassionate understanding of yourself and your interactions with others. Mindfulness as a tool for ego awareness. Mindfulness works like a quiet mirror, showing us the subtle ways the ego slips into our everyday life. When we pay gentle attention to what's happening right now, without rushing or judging, we start to notice patterns we usually miss. The ego, with its constant chatter about who we are and what we need, often hides in the background like an unseen actor shaping our reactions and feelings. It whispers stories about success, failure, comparison, and validation, weaving itself into the fabric of ordinary moments. By slowing down with mindfulness, we can sense this invisible presence more clearly, catching those moments when we are acting from ego rather than true self-awareness. It's as if we're holding up a soft light in a dark room, revealing the corners where ego quietly dwells. Bringing presence into simple experiences, breathing, feeling a touch, hearing a sound, invites us to watch the ego's grip loosen a little at a time. Each breath becomes a quiet door into now, where ego's loud demands fade into the background noise. When you sit with your breath and notice it without trying to change it, you create a space where ego doesn't get to decide your worth or your mood. Instead, curiosity steps in, gently observing how the mind spins stories about the world and yourself. By watching these moments with kindness and without criticism, you begin to make friends with the ego instead of running from it or pushing it away. This soft curiosity transforms how you relate to yourself, allowing for a quiet honesty that opens up new room for growth. Try this: when a strong feeling or thought arises, maybe pride, defensiveness, or judgment, pause and breathe. Instead of immediately reacting, see if you can watch what it feels like inside your body. Is there tightness in the chest, a clench in the jaw, or quickening in the heartbeat? Naming these sensations can help you step back from the rush of ego-driven emotion. You're not trying to silence the ego but giving yourself the gentle chance to notice it as just one part of your human experience. Over time, this practice softens the ego's loud voice, revealing that beneath it is a wiser, quieter self waiting to be heard. The journey is less about fighting the ego and more about learning how to live with it as a friendly companion rather than a demanding boss. One subtle but powerful way to invite this shift is through simple moments of grounding attention. Imagine feeling the texture of your clothes against your skin or the temperature of the air on your face in a crowded room. These small acts of notice pull you away from ego's endless stories of comparison and worry and back into your own body, your own present reality. As you focus inward, the ego's need to protect an image or defend a belief slowly loosens. When you approach these moments with softness and a touch of wonder, as if you were meeting an old friend afresh, ego's grip relaxes further. Presence becomes a gentle anchor, available any time you feel pulled into ego's drama, reminding you can always return to your own calm center. Case studies. Common ego patterns in daily interactions. Imagine sitting in a simple conversation and suddenly feeling a flicker of judgment, a need to be right, or even a subtle retreat into silence. These moments, often unnoticed, reveal the quiet ways our egos cloak themselves behind familiar faces, moments that happen with parents, friends, or colleagues. For example, a friend shares a story, and instead of listening fully, the urge to correct or compete whispers in the background. Or during a team meeting, someone presents an idea, and suddenly the instinct rises to dismiss it, not because of its flaws, but because it threatens our sense of competence or recognition. These everyday interactions are rich grounds where ego patterns quietly play their part, gently shaping our reactions and perceptions without us even realizing it. When we observe these moments, it becomes clear that ego often manifests as defensiveness, superiority, or a deep desire for validation. Take defensiveness, for instance. Someone criticizes us, and instead of considering their point, we armor ourselves with excuses or rebuttals. On the surface, it looks like we're standing up for ourselves, but beneath that armor is a fragile sense of worth. Similarly, a person might display a superiority trait, talking over others or dismissing ideas, because deep inside, they want to prove they are the smartest or the most capable. Validation seeking appears as subtle smiles, eager nods, or even self-deprecating remarks, all hunger for affirmation. Each of these patterns shows how the ego feels threatened or unfulfilled, prompting us to act in ways that momentarily satisfy that inner hunger, yet often disconnect us from authentic connections. Recognizing these patterns in daily life isn't about judging ourselves or others. It's about noticing the subtle cues. For example, if you find yourself feeling irritated when someone offers a different opinion, ask what part of you feels challenged. Is it your sense of knowing? Your worthiness? Or perhaps you need to be heard or validated? If you catch yourself comparing your achievements to others, it's worth considering whether your ego craves superiority or recognition. Even small jabs of defensiveness or dismissiveness mirror deeper needs for safety or esteem. Becoming aware of these moments is like shining a gentle light on the quiet corners where ego lurks, an act of kindness to yourself, opening the door to more genuine interactions and an easier way to respond instead of react. In practicing awareness, simple shifts can help soften ego's hold. Try pausing just before responding, breathe, and check in with what's really happening inside. Is there a desire to prove something? An eagerness to be right or better? Recognizing that need allows you to choose a different response, one rooted in curiosity or empathy rather than defensiveness. When you notice superiority creeping in, remind yourself that everyone's perspective is valid, including your own. With validation seeking, practice giving genuine appreciation to others without expecting anything in return. These small, conscious acts don't erase ego entirely but help loosen its grip, creating space for more authentic, peaceful interactions. Over time, recognizing these quiet ego patterns becomes a gentle, unfolding process of self-discovery that turns daily moments into opportunities for growth and connection, where the ego no longer rules, but collaborates. Chapter 7. The impact of the ego on emotions and behavior. Ego and emotional reactivity. Understanding the connection. The ego often acts as a mirror and a magnifier of our emotional responses, amplifying feelings in ways that keep us caught in endless cycles of reactivity. When something triggers us, it's usually the ego that takes the first hit, swelling with indignation, anger, or hurt. For example, if someone dismisses an idea we believe in, the ego feels attacked. As a result, emotions can explode, and what started as a simple disagreement can escalate into a heated argument. This tendency makes it hard to simply address the situation calmly because the emotions feel so overwhelming. When emotions are high, our capacity for reason tends to dip. Instead of seeing the situation for what it is, we might end up responding based on how we feel in that moment, often leading to regret later. It's like being trapped in a funhouse mirror that twists and distorts everything, making our emotions seem more intense than they are. Being aware of these underlying dynamics creates an opportunity to shift our responses. If we can recognize the voice of the ego whispering in our ears, we can choose to respond from a place of groundedness instead of reactivity. Practicing mindfulness can be especially helpful here. When faced with a strong emotion, take a step back and breathe. Ask yourself what is truly at stake. Is it a matter of principle, or are you responding to something deeper about how you see yourself? This kind of introspection can transform the way you interact, bringing a sense of clarity that cuts through the chaos of emotion. Over time, these practices can help us loosen the ego's grip, making our emotional responses more authentic and constructive. How ego influences decision-making and choices. Every choice we make carries the silent fingerprints of our ego, weaving a complex pattern beneath the surface of what seems like a simple decision. The ego operates quietly, often misunderstood as just pride or arrogance, but it is much deeper, a storyteller weaving narratives of who we are, who we hope to be, and who we fear becoming. These stories are fueled by desires and fears that aren't always obvious. Sometimes, the ego nudges us toward decisions that promise approval or safety, even when our heart whispers a different path. Imagine standing at a crossroads where one route feels truly yours and the other glimmers with the glow of social acceptance or self-preservation. The ego often pulls us toward that shimmering path because it craves validation and order. The ego's influence goes beyond wanting to be right or admired. It gravitates toward control, seeking to steer our lives in predictable directions. This need for control can be both a shield and a trap. In moments of stress or uncertainty, the ego tightens its grip, convincing us that clinging to familiar roles and identities will keep us safe. When we face big decisions, this urge can cloud our vision, making what feels authentic slip out of reach. For instance, someone might choose a career that others applaud rather than one that stokes their passion, simply because the ego calculated the safer, more respectable route. The ego distracts us from peaceful, honest choices by feeding off anxiety, telling us that if we stray, we risk losing security or self-worth. Think of the ego as a shadowy companion on your journey, whispering fears and desires you might not always catch. It often shapes decisions by spinning stories about failure, success, approval, or rejection. These narratives create invisible boundaries, where the ego grades each option based on how it protects or enhances the self-image. This can appear in small ways too, a hesitation to ask for help, a reluctance to admit a mistake, or the urge to prove ourselves in conversations. Each choice then becomes a delicate dance between what truly feels right and what the ego demands for survival. The challenge lies in recognizing this dance and learning to listen to that quieter, steadier voice beneath the clamor of ego-driven judgments. When the ego's hunger for validation takes the lead, decisions often become less about personal truth and more about external approval or avoiding discomfort. For example, someone may stay in a relationship or job that drains them because the ego fears judgment from others or doubts their own capacity to manage change. This fear of losing face or being vulnerable can steer us away from paths that bring real contentment. Even when we act in our best interest, the ego's version of interest is usually tied to preserving status, reputation, or control rather than honest fulfillment. This creates a paradox where choices aim to protect the self instead trap us in cycles of dissatisfaction. At its core, the ego looks for certainty, trying to command the unpredictable tides of life by clinging to familiar identities and stories. Yet, this same instinct often blinds us to the freedom that comes with stepping outside those stories, being authentic, and accepting impermanence. True peace shows up when we loosen the ego's grip, letting go of the need to control every outcome or prove ourselves endlessly. This opens doors to decisions rooted in genuine desire rather than fear. It's a gradual shift, learning to notice when the ego whispers you must or you can't and choosing instead to pause, breathe, and ask, what feels right to me? What nourishes my soul? This way, choices become acts of self-kindness, not battles for survival. One way to begin inviting this shift is to cultivate simple mindfulness around decision moments. When you catch yourself swept up in worry about image, control, or approval, take a step back and observe what the ego is trying to protect. You might ask yourself, is this decision serving my deepest truth, or am I obeying an old story? Practicing this gentle questioning helps untangle ego's grip and clears space for authenticity to emerge. Over time, you'll find that decisions made from this place lead to a calmer heart and a clearer path, where choices align more closely with who you truly are instead of the mask your ego wears. Managing ego-driven fear, shame, and pride. When we think about the ego, it's tempting to see it as just vanity or self-importance. But underneath those surface layers, ego functions like a built-in defense system. It's always on alert, trying to keep us safe from perceived threats that often come in the form of shame, fear, or pride. These emotions act like shields, signaling, stay small, or don't get hurt, even when that's exactly what's holding us back. They turn our internal world into a battleground, where the ego's goal is to maintain a sense of control and avoid discomfort, even at the cost of growth and connection. Fear, shame, and pride aren't inherently bad. They are part of our survival toolkit, emotions designed to keep us safe in one way or another. Fear warns us of danger, shame keeps us from being vulnerable, and pride helps us preserve a sense of worth. But here's the catch: while these feelings served us long ago, they often morph into obstacles once they grow unchecked. Fear can paralyze, shame can whisper that we are unworthy, and pride can block honesty or real connection. Recognizing how these emotions act like gatekeepers is the first step in understanding how ego controls much of our reactions and choices, often without us realizing it. Take a moment to reflect. Have you ever avoided doing something because you felt ashamed? Or defended yourself fiercely when criticized, out of pride? Or been gripped by an overwhelming fear of failure that kept you from trying? These moments reveal how ego, hiding behind emotion, keeps us from being authentic. They act as a screen behind which we hide our true selves, fearing that if we let go of these defenses, we might face rejection or loss. Yet, these feelings are not the enemy. They are signals that can guide us toward understanding ourselves better. When we see them clearly, we can start to notice how they shape our stories and our reactions. Learning to see these emotions as parts of a larger, protective pattern can open the door to transformation. Recognizing fear, shame, and pride creates space for curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of fighting these feelings, we can gently observe them, asking what they are trying to protect us from. That awareness alone begins to loosen the grip of ego. When we no longer accept these fears as the absolute truth, we create room for new experiences, those rooted in humility, connection, and courage. This shift is not about erasing the feelings but about seeing them clearly and choosing whether they define us or serve us. The first step in managing these feelings is becoming aware of them in real time. Sometimes, it's noticing the rapid heartbeat when someone critiques us or the tightness in the stomach before making a significant decision. Other times, it's paying attention to the stories we tell ourselves about failure or worthiness, those tiny inner voices that tell us to hide or defend. Mindfulness practices work wonders here. Just pausing to observe what we're feeling without immediate judgment allows the feelings to surface instead of from the unconscious depths of ego. Over time, this pause becomes a habit, like creating a safe space inside where truth can surface without being smothered by fear or pride. Once we recognize these emotions, it's helpful to ask gentle questions. What am I afraid of losing? What shame am I carrying? Or how is my pride keeping me from being real? The key isn't to suppress or eliminate these feelings but to understand their origin and purpose. With that understanding, we can start to reframe our reactions. For example, instead of defending ourselves out of pride, we might say, "I don't have to be right all the time." Instead of avoiding shame by hiding, we can choose to face it with honesty. "That's a part of me I'm learning to accept." This openness weakens ego's hold and invites genuine growth. Practical tools can also help shift these emotions from barriers to bridges. Writing about our fears or shame helps bring unconscious patterns into awareness. Breathing exercises or gentle physical movements serve as anchors when emotions surge, providing calm and clarity. Building connections with trusted friends or mentors allows us to share our vulnerabilities without fear of judgment. As we practice humility and openness, pride loses its grip, and we start to see ourselves and others more clearly. This creates a cycle. Each small act of honesty chips away at ego's armor, making space for genuine connection and authentic self-expression. Remember, transforming ego-driven emotions is a process, not a one-time fix. Every time we choose awareness over avoidance, humility over defensiveness, or vulnerability over pride, we reinforce a new way of being. It's not about becoming fearless, but about becoming willing to feel and learn from those feelings. With patience, a gentle attitude towards ourselves, and consistent practice, these emotions become clues rather than cages. Eventually, they guide us toward a softer, more authentic version of ourselves, one that isn't driven by fear, shame, or pride but by genuine curiosity and compassionate understanding. Sometimes, simply taking a moment to ask yourself, "What am I feeling right now? What does this emotion want me to know?" can open a door. Recognize that these feelings are part of a natural human experience. They don't define your worth. They offer an invitation to see beyond the ego's walls and find the strength beneath, the strength to be honest, vulnerable, and truly free. Strategies for emotional regulation rooted in ego awareness. Understanding our ego can be a game changer when it comes to managing our emotions. The ego often acts as a lens through which we interpret our experiences, coloring them with our judgments, fears, and desires. When we become aware of this, we can start to see how our reactions are more about our ego's protection than the situation at hand. For instance, when someone criticizes us, our initial instinct may be to defend ourselves fiercely. This is the ego bristling, desperate to maintain its facade of strength and worth. But what if, instead of reacting defensively, we pause to consider the underlying feelings? By doing so, we create space for grace and understanding, allowing ourselves to respond with empathy instead of anger. This awareness helps us navigate our emotional landscape with more clarity. Presence in the moment fosters our ability to regulate emotions. When we acknowledge our ego's triggers, we start to uncover the roots of our feelings. Perhaps a sudden wave of jealousy arises not just from seeing a friend's success, but from an internal fear of inadequacy. Recognizing that this feeling has more to do with our self-esteem than the situation allows us to meet it with kindness rather than shame. In moments like these, taking a step back enables us to process our emotions more thoughtfully. Instead of being reactive, we can respond with a composed mind, recognizing that feelings, however intense, are temporary. This simple shift in perspective creates a tranquil space for both self-reflection and thoughtful conversation. Building emotional regulation starts with recognizing when our ego takes the driver's seat in our responses. One effective practice is mindfulness. By being present and observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can identify our ego-driven reactions. For example, when you notice a sudden surge of irritation while scrolling through social media, take a moment to breathe deeply. Ask yourself what is really at play here. Is it a fear of missing out or a comparison to others? This inquiry can drive you toward greater understanding and compassion for yourself. You might find that simply acknowledging your emotional response can help in diffusing its intensity. Reframing our perspective also plays a crucial role in emotional regulation. Instead of labeling our feelings as good or bad, we can view them as signals that deserve attention. This approach encourages a steady mind that can respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Practicing gratitude is another useful exercise. When faced with challenging emotions, listing things you are thankful for can shift your focus away from negativity. Gradually, nurturing a compassionate space allows kindness for ourselves and others to flourish, inviting a sense of calm in emotional turbulence. Recognizing that it's okay to feel a range of emotions, and treating ourselves with the same compassion would extend to a friend, lays a solid foundation for emotional health. Lastly, consider developing a routine that promotes emotional awareness and resilience. Journaling can be an impactful tool. Jot down your emotions, triggers, and reflections regularly. This practice not only helps in identifying patterns in your emotional responses but also serves as a safe space to untangle complex feelings. Remember, emotional regulation is not about suppressing emotions. It's about understanding and managing them. By creating a clear dialogue with yourself, you build a steady inner landscape that can weather any storm. Chapter 8. Cultivating Self-Compassion and Inner Acceptance. Transforming self-criticism into compassionate awareness. Self-criticism often arrives like a strict guardian, standing at the door of our deepest ambitions. It whispers reminders of where we've fallen short, urging us to do better, be better. At first glance, this voice seems helpful. After all, it pushes us toward high standards and growth. But beneath this protective role lies a tricky trap. When self-criticism tightens its grip, it wraps us in a cycle of pain where mistakes feel like failures, and imperfections become burdens. What begins as a nudge toward improvement can morph into an endless loop of harsh judgment, leaving us stuck in suffering that serves no one's best interest. The tension between aiming for excellence and avoiding unnecessary self-punishment is a delicate balance, one that invites us to pause and gently explore where these inner voices come from. At its root, self-criticism often grows from a place of care. It's our mind's way of keeping us safe, encouraging us not to repeat past stumbles or to measure up to standards we believe protect us from rejection. Early experiences, cultural messages, and personal beliefs shape this voice, which sometimes speaks louder than kindness. When the mind equates worth with achievement, criticism can start to feel like a currency for self-value, even though it chips away at our confidence. Recognizing this origin story, the reason self-criticism arose, is like shining a light into a shadowed room. It creates distance, allowing us to see the critic not as an enemy, but as a misunderstood part of ourselves trying, though imperfectly, to help. This gentle shift from being trapped by harsh thoughts to witnessing their source marks the beginning of true awareness. The power of awareness lies in its softness. It doesn't aim to silence the critical voice instantly, but to listen without getting entangled. When we can acknowledge these internal judgments without reacting, we create space for understanding rather than resistance. Questions such as, "Where is this voice coming from?" or "What is it trying to protect me from?" open pathways from struggle to insight. This curiosity acts as a bridge, guiding us from suffering toward a different relationship with ourselves, one where high standards live alongside self-acceptance, and growth can arise without the sting of relentless criticism. Meeting our inner critic with compassion starts by recognizing it as a familiar voice rather than an invader. The critic speaks in a tone many of us know well, shaped by old fears, societal pressures, and moments when we felt unseen or unworthy. By naming this voice, by imagining it as part of a conversation within us rather than a verdict, we begin to soften its edge. Compassionate awareness encourages us to lean in with kindness, like sitting beside a nervous friend rather than confronting a foe. This shift transforms judgment into curiosity, blame into understanding. Instead of fighting or fleeing, we learn to listen, responding not with sharp retorts but gentle reassurance. These moments of kindness toward the self don't require grand gestures or profound revelations. They can be as simple as pausing to recognize when the inner critic appears, then reminding ourselves with quiet words, "I see you, and I'm here." Cultivating this kindness is an everyday practice, one that deepens each time we choose understanding over condemnation. Over time, it softens the habit of defaulting to blame and nurtures a friendlier inner dialogue. Compassion does not erase the critic but invites it into a new kind of relationship, one where its concerns are heard but no longer dictate how we feel about ourselves. Practicing compassionate awareness means embracing the whole of who we are, even the parts that feel flawed or afraid. It asks us to meet ourselves as we would a cherished companion, with patience, warmth, and steady attention. This gentle practice can be woven into daily life through small acts, a kindness journal, moments of mindful breathing when judgment arises, or simply placing a hand over the heart during stressful thoughts. These habits build new neural pathways, reshaping how we respond to our internal messages. Each act of compassion rewrites the story we tell ourselves, making room for growth without pain. Next time the inner critic speaks, try this. Imagine that voice as a concerned friend rather than a harsh taskmaster. Notice the words without rushing to agree or disagree. Then, invite a kind response, not as a denial of truth, but as a balm for the bruises of self-judgment. This simple shift plants a seed of compassionate awareness that, watered consistently, will bloom into a more gentle and balanced way of being with yourself. Over time, you may find that the path to growth is not paved with harsh reprimands but illuminated by the light of kindness and presence. Practicing loving kindness for all aspects of the self. Imagine whispering a greeting to each part of yourself as you wake up in the morning. Some parts may feel eager and hopeful, others tired or hesitant. These fragments of your inner world are like long-lost friends, each carrying stories, fears, or hopes. Instead of turning away or criticizing what feels wrong, try to greet them with warmth. This isn't about fixing things overnight, but gently holding space for your whole being, acknowledging that every piece has a reason for being there. When you begin to see yourself through this kind lens, your internal landscape starts to soften and become more approachable, like a familiar face greeting you with a smile. This act of turning inward with kindness isn't always easy. It often requires patience, a willingness to listen without judgment. Sometimes, we get caught up in telling ourselves what should be different or better but forget the simple truth: all of us carry a mix of light and shadow. Recognizing that our unmet needs, fears, or past wounds are part of our story helps us develop compassion. It's as if each fragment of ourselves is an old friend who just needs to be heard and loved, not fixed or discarded. When we approach ourselves with gentle curiosity rather than harsh critique, our inner world becomes a little more inviting and safe. Taking this a step further, you might notice how each fragment responds when met with kindness. A part that clenches in shame may loosen up and relax its grip. A quiet, unsure part might find courage to speak up, feeling truly seen. This process isn't about perfection but about building a new relationship with yourself, one rooted in kindness, patience, and understanding. Over time, this practice can shift your entire inner climate, turning internal conflicts into opportunities for love and connection. Remember, you're not trying to fix yourself but discovering a way to be present with yourself exactly as you are, like a supportive friend who celebrates your every bit. One practical way to develop kindness toward every part of yourself is to set aside a few moments each day for a simple internal check-in. Close your eyes and notice what feelings or thoughts are present. When you spot a harsh inner voice, instead of battling it, gently ask, "What do you need right now?" Or "How can I support you?" This question opens the door to dialogue, shifting the mind from judgment to curiosity. If you hear a voice saying, "You're not good enough," respond with, "I hear you, and I care. Let's see how I can help you feel safer." Over time, this kind of response nurtures the critical voice into a more understanding one, fostering partnerships within your mind rather than inner battles. It can also be helpful to imagine physically holding different parts of yourself in your imagination, offering them comfort and reassurance. Picture a worried part trembling and gently wrapping it in a warm blanket of kindness. Or see a proud but tired part relaxing as you acknowledge its efforts. This visualization creates a bridge between awareness and compassion, allowing each fragment to feel seen and appreciated. Incorporate affirmations that affirm your inherent worth, like "I am enough," or "I treat myself with kindness." These little practices, taken consistently, can slowly change how you speak to yourself, replacing inner criticism with gentle support. Another approach involves writing a compassionate letter to yourself, expressing understanding and kindness for all your struggles and successes. Perhaps you thank yourself for persisting through difficulties or acknowledge the parts that try their best despite discomfort. By putting these feelings into words, we humanize our inner landscape, making it easier to embrace each fragment with love. Remember, transforming inner critics into allies isn't about denying problems but about shifting perspective so that kindness becomes the default. Over time, these small acts become a gentle chorus of friendship within your mind, making it easier to face life with patience and compassion. Finally, keep in mind that loving kindness isn't always grand or dramatic. Sometimes, it's as simple as taking a deep breath when you notice self-criticism and silently whispering, "May I be kind to myself now?" Small, consistent gestures often carry the most profound change. Kindness begins with noticing and responding with gentle awareness, creating a ripple through your entire inner world. As you practice, your inner voice may start to soften from harshness to warmth, helping you feel more connected and at peace with yourself, beyond all the stories you tell about who you are or aren't. Tools for embracing imperfection and uncertainty. We often find ourselves caught in the trap of perfectionism, where every flaw becomes a liability and every moment of uncertainty is met with anxiety. However, when we open our hearts to the idea that imperfections are not just mistakes but rather gentle teachers, a quiet revolution begins within us. Imagine your flaws as soft, nurturing whispers that guide you toward growth rather than as harsh critiques. When we learn to welcome our imperfections, we gain the ability to learn from each stumble, each moment of self-doubt. This change in perspective transforms the narrative of our lives from one of pressure and anxiety to one rich with acceptance and possibility. Uncertainty, too, has a role to play in this journey. It can feel daunting when we don't know what lies ahead. Think of it like stepping into the fog. The unknown might seem intimidating, but it's also full of potential. Embracing uncertainty allows us to be flexible and open to possibilities that we would otherwise miss. Each moment of self-doubt or imperfection turns into a chance to embrace vulnerability, a place where real connection with ourselves and others is formed. When we stop resisting what's uncomfortable, we often find the richest moments waiting for us just beyond the edge of our comfort zone. Once we accept that imperfections and uncertainties are part of our human experience, we can cultivate self-compassion, a real salve for the heart. Mindfulness becomes our guiding star in this effort. One simple practice is to regularly pause throughout your day to check in with yourself. Ask questions like, how am I feeling right now? What thoughts are swirling around in my head? By creating this space, we allow ourselves to process our emotions without judgment. This practice encourages a kinder conversation with ourselves, where self-criticism begins to soften. Another powerful tool is journaling. Writing down our thoughts and feelings can illuminate the patterns we often miss when we keep everything bottled up. As you put pen to paper, you might find clarity emerging from the clutter of your mind. Record your uncertainties alongside your hopes, making room for both and observing how they coexist. You may even express gratitude for your imperfections, recognizing them as part of your unique story. Each entry becomes a gentle reminder that you are perfectly imperfect, navigating life's unpredictability one day at a time. Finding supportive communities can also nurture this sense of self-acceptance. Surrounding yourself with people who embrace their own imperfections can create an environment where it's safe to be vulnerable. Share your stories, your fears, and your triumphs. This communal practice serves as a mirror. You'll see reflections of your own journey in the experiences of others. Together, you can cultivate resilience, knowing you are not alone. Remember, life's unpredictability is not something to fear. It's a landscape where moments of connection and growth await, hidden beneath the surface. Daily rituals to foster inner compassion and patience. There's a quiet power in how a morning begins. It's a subtle moment, often unnoticed, where you can choose to cradle your own spirit with kindness before the demands of the day rush in. Sitting for a few minutes in mindful silence, simply noticing your breath, can anchor you in a soft place within yourself. It's like giving your heart a gentle hug before stepping into the world's noise. This pause is not about pushing thoughts away but letting them rise and fall without judgment, creating space to welcome yourself as you are. Adding soft affirmations can deepen this nurturing time. Instead of listing accomplishments or tasks, try affirming who you are beneath everything else, a person worthy of love and patience simply by existing. Words like, I am enough, or I meet today with kindness, can act like gentle lights guiding your mind away from self-criticism. When these affirmations become part of your daily rhythm, they slowly settle into your subconscious, rewiring how you talk to yourself during moments of stress or frustration. Imagine this ritual as waking a small seed within you each morning, a seed that grows resilience rather than stress, compassion rather than impatience. This seed thrives not because you force it to grow, but because you gently tend it with attention and warmth. Over time, your mornings transform from a checklist into a sacred space that honors your inner world, the real compass for how patiently and kindly you treat yourself and others. Evenings offer a chance to slow down and gather the day's fragments with tenderness. Journaling gratitude, rather than creating a task list or reviewing what went wrong, becomes a quiet ritual that shifts your focus to moments where you felt safe, seen, or joyful. It doesn't have to be a long list. Sometimes just one simple thing, a smile from a stranger or a comforting cup of tea, can remind you of life's gentle pulse. Writing these moments down invites your mind to rest in kindness rather than critique. Alongside gratitude, allowing space for self-compassion through reflection helps ease the tightness that impatience can cause. Instead of replaying mistakes or rushing toward the next day's to-dos, you might ask yourself softly what you needed today or how you cared for your own heart. This reflection invites patience to flow naturally, as you recognize that like everyone else, you are a work in progress with moments that unfold unevenly. Viewing your day with gentle eyes turns frustration into understanding, impatience into acceptance. When you take a few minutes before bed to return to your own story in this kind way, it calms restless thoughts that can otherwise stir anxiety. Your mind learns that kindness isn't only for others but a sanctuary you carry within yourself. This nightly ritual smooths the edge of perfectionism and invites you to fall asleep wrapped in compassion instead of self-judgment, an invitation to wake with that same grace the following morning. Chapter 9. Techniques for dissolving the ego's grip. Meditative practices for ego observation and surrender. Imagine sitting quietly, watching a small child discover the world around them. There's no judgment, no need to label what they see as good or bad. They simply observe with wide eyes, curiosity opening every corner of their mind. When we approach our inner world this way, we start to see the ego not as something to battle or eliminate but as a part of ourselves to understand. Meditative practices that focus on gentle observation become like a welcoming arm around a shy friend. Instead of pushing away the thoughts and feelings that arise, we learn to watch them, notice their shape and color, and let them pass like clouds drifting across the sky. One of the simplest ways to cultivate this kind of curiosity is through breath awareness. As you breathe in, imagine inviting your thoughts and feelings into the room of your mind. As you breathe out, picture gently releasing them, like letting a leaf fall on a stream. With each inhale and exhale, practice softly saying to yourself, "Here it is," or "That's interesting." Over time, this soft noticing creates an atmosphere of openness rather than resistance. The ego begins to feel less like a boss barking orders and more like a curious visitor who is gently observed, not judged. This attitude of gentle curiosity helps loosen the grip of identification with certain thoughts or stories, allowing them to come and go without you getting caught inside them. Another helpful practice is to imagine your thoughts as waves in the ocean, forever rolling onto the shore and receding. When a wave of ego-driven thinking arises, complaining, judging, craving, see it as just a wave, not the entire ocean of your being. Watch it rise and fall, knowing it's temporary. This visualization fosters a sense of spaciousness, a way to see your inner life as fluid and ever-changing, rather than fixed or threatening. Over time, this perspective encourages a natural curiosity. What does this wave want to tell me? Can I observe it without giving it permission to define who I am? These practices nurture a gentle stance that allows you to stand beside your thoughts rather than get entangled inside them. Learning to loosen the ego's grip isn't about forcing or fighting against what arises. It's about creating enough space for a different relationship to unfold. Taking a few moments each day for mindful reflection can help you step back from the constant chatter of the mind. Sit in a comfortable position, close your eyes, and simply notice your thoughts as they drift through your awareness. If a story begins, about failure, success, how you should be, acknowledge it softly and say to yourself, "There's that story again." Let it float by without trying to hold on to it or push it away. With time, you'll start to see that these stories are just shapes and sounds, not the truth of who you are. Breath awareness is a powerful tool here. Focus on your breathing, notice the sensation of air flowing in and out, calmly and effortlessly. Whenever the ego's voice feels loud, use your breath as an anchor. Hold gently to the in-breath and out-breath and remind yourself that underneath the noise of the mind, there is a quiet presence that simply observes without judgment. This loving distance, seeing your thoughts and stories as passing events, creates a softer perspective that makes surrender feel like a natural unfolding rather than a confrontation. It's as if you're watching yourself from a gentle hill, holding space for everything that comes and goes without trying to control the process. Transforming the inner storyteller begins with noticing how often we react as if that voice is the absolute truth. When you observe this voice with kindness, you start to see it as a part of you, not the full story. Sometimes, simply saying inwardly, "I hear you," or "It's just a thought," creates enough distance to loosen its hold. This act of acknowledgement, without judgment, invites a sense of loving curiosity. Over time, this practice can help you respond to ego-driven reactions rather than automatically follow them. The key is consistent gentle attention, turning the internal dialogue into a kind dialogue, one that recognizes the ego's patterns but does not feed them. In this space of soft observation, surrender naturally becomes a gentle return to presence, a constant revisiting of that quiet, unshakable core. Breath work and body awareness to release ego tensions. Conscious breath and body awareness can be powerful tools for navigating the often turbulent waters of our emotions and thoughts. When we intentionally focus on our breath, We create a pause in the constant chatter of our minds. This moment of stillness allows us to feel the weight of our experiences without judgment, gently coaxing the ego's rigid grip to loosen. It's as if, in this simple act of breathing, we invite a compassionate friend to sit with us amid our chaos. When our attention shifts to the rhythm of our breath, we become more aware of the sensations coursing through our bodies, the tightness in our shoulders, or the flutter of anxiety in our stomachs. These sensations often hold stories of past hurts and attachments that shape who we think we are. By anchoring ourselves in the present, we begin to recognize that we are not merely our worries, our titles, or our past failures. Instead, we are a living, breathing tapestry of experiences that can shift and transform with each inhalation and exhalation. Being present through breathwork facilitates a deeper connection with ourselves. This is particularly grounding in times of stress, allowing us to discern between the ego's demands and our authentic desires. When we breathe consciously, we signal to our bodies that it is safe to let go. The repetitive cycle of inhaling and exhaling offers a structure that feels familiar and comforting, like coming home after a long journey. As we navigate this space, we can gently anticipate the release of tightly held emotions, watching as they dissipate like clouds in the vast sky of our consciousness. Ultimately, it is this shift toward presence and self-awareness that enables us to soften the ego's role and embrace a more expansive view of ourselves and the world. Practicing mindful breathing can be simpler than you might think. Taking a moment to sit quietly, closing your eyes, and bringing focus to your breath opens a portal to profound change. It's about observing your breath without forcing it, noticing how it naturally moves in and out. With each inhalation, visualize inviting in calmness, while with each exhalation, imagine releasing tension and expectations. Allow this cycle to take over as you become an observer of your own rhythm. This practice doesn't have to be lengthy. A few minutes can set a tone of awareness throughout your day. Gradually, you might find yourself tuning into your physical sensations with greater ease. Perhaps there's a recurring tightness in your chest that reflects unspoken worries, or maybe your hands carry the tension of unmet responsibilities. Acknowledge these feelings as they arise without judgment, recognizing them as valid parts of your human experience. As you explore these techniques, it becomes clear that the ego's grip often holds us back from experiencing life fully. When we give ourselves the gift of presence, even through simple acts of mindful breathing, we begin to dissolve this grip. Embrace the sensations that come forth. They're the echoes of your truth calling for attention. To deepen this practice, consider integrating moments throughout your day where you pause to reconnect with your breath. Whether it's while waiting at a stoplight, during a lunch break, or even as you prepare for sleep, these small moments can contribute to a larger sense of liberation. By committing to this dance of awareness, you begin to see the beautiful complexities of your existence and learn to celebrate them. In this way, you allow grace to replace tension and open the door to a more authentic, joyful life. Remember, the journey to releasing ego tensions is ongoing and unfolds gradually. The more you practice listening to your body and breathing mindfully, the more your inner landscape transforms. Create space for this exploration, nurturing curiosity rather than judgment. As you breathe, remind yourself that every inhale is a moment of new beginnings and every exhale can release the need for perfection. Each cycle of breath brings you closer to freedom. Mirror work, confronting and releasing ego attachments. Look into a mirror and really see yourself, not the polished version you present to the world, but the raw, unfiltered being reflected back. Mirror work invites us into this vulnerable confrontation with our own image, a gentle yet potent way to face the ego's illusions. The ego thrives on masks and stories we tell ourselves to feel secure. Stories about who we should be, what we must have, or how others need to perceive us. When you meet your own eyes in the mirror and refuse to look away, those stories start to unravel. It's like catching a shadow in the act, noticing the puffed-up sense of self that clings to identity like barnacles on a ship's hull. The mirror doesn't just reflect your face, it reveals the spaces where ego wants to stay unseen, the places where pride, fear, or insecurity hide under the surface. This process isn't about judgment or pushing yourself to fix what appears. It's about steady presence with what is. By meeting yourself daily in this direct way, you invite honesty to the forefront. The moment you acknowledge your ego's grip, you create room to loosen it. It's not a battle, it's more like becoming an observer of your own mind's reflections, watching the ego's drama unfold as if from the sidelines, but with kindness in your eyes. The mirror becomes a gateway, a moment of pause where you can see the ego's illusions as fleeting shapes rather than absolute truths. Through this humble encounter, layers of self-deception peel away, revealing the quieter, truer self hidden beneath. One unexpected truth shines here: the ego often feels fragile and desperate rather than powerful. It clings fiercely because it fears loss of control, status, love, or safety. When you meet these fears calmly, the ego's reign softens. Mirror work transforms from a simple ritual into a soulful dialogue, where the self and its shadows meet without the need to fight, escape, or pretend. In the stillness of your gaze, you start cultivating a curious compassion toward the parts of you that have been carrying this burden in silence for so long. Using mirror work to free yourself from ego attachments is about more than just recognizing the ego's tricks. It's about inviting new ways of relating to yourself. One practice that helps is to speak gently to your reflection, using affirmations that honor your humanness without feeding the ego's hunger for perfection. Instead of demanding, "I must be better," say, "I accept the parts of me that I usually hide." This subtle shift opens a door from resistance into self-compassion. As these words fill the space between you and your reflection, the tight grip of ego loosens, and a sense of ease begins to flow. Awareness also grows when you notice your inner dialogue during mirror work. Do you find yourself criticizing, defending, or striving to prove something? Recognizing these patterns is a key step. It's like watching the ego's little theater from the audience. Sometimes it demands applause, other times it craves sympathy, but always it wants to be noticed. You don't have to give in to its scripts. Instead, try to witness with gentle curiosity what emotions the ego's stories bring up: shame, anger, pride, or envy. Naming these feelings without getting swept away creates distance, which in turn offers freedom. Let the mirror become a daily moment to check in, not as a judge, but as an ally. Notice how each session may stir different sensations or insights, reflecting the ever-changing nature of your inner world. This practice quietly encourages a deeper understanding that your worth isn't tied to any label your ego insists on, like success or failure, beauty or worthiness. With time, you'll feel how the constant refrain of ego-driven demands softens into a calm knowing that you are enough simply as you are, reflected back by both the glass and your own compassionate heart. Try starting your mirror work with a simple, grounding ritual. Look into your eyes and take a few slow breaths, allowing any tension or stories to settle. Then, softly say, "I see you. I accept you." If tears or laughter come, welcome them, they are part of the release. Let this moment be a quiet friendship between your present self and the parts that struggle to be seen without armor. Remember, this isn't a task to check off but an ongoing conversation that honors your evolving self. Guided visualization for ego dissolution and expansion. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet forest, sunlight filtering softly through the leaves. In your mind's eye, see yourself stepping into a small, inviting clearing within that forest, a sacred space just for you. As you settle into this peaceful spot, notice how the outside world begins to fade into a gentle hush. The usual chatter of your thoughts quiets, and a sense of calm begins to settle over you. Here, in this tranquil corner within, the whispers of the ego soften, like distant echoes slowly fading away. Allow your breath to become slow and steady, syncing with the gentle rhythm of the scene. Feel your body relax, releasing tension with each breath. As you can imagine this sacred space, the mind naturally begins to loosen its grip on the sense of separation, the idea that you are just a small, isolated self against an endless universe. Instead, it becomes easier to sense that this space is a point of connection, a place where the ego's voice gently dissolves, revealing a deeper stillness underneath. This is your safe retreat, a place where you can begin to shed the layers of self-identity that typically define who you are. As you deepen into this visualization, picture the ego as a whispering wind, present, but soft. Its sounds are familiar, but they no longer hold power over you here. Allow those whispers to grow faint, as if softening into whispers of the past. Feel how, in this space, your sense of separateness begins to blur. The boundaries of who you think you are start to soften, making room for a new perspective, one that recognizes you as part of something larger, more interconnected than the ego's voice can contain. This gentle clearing within becomes a place of quiet openness, where the subtle layers of the ego can gently fall away without force or struggle. Now that you have begun to create a calm, sacred space within, imagine your awareness stretching beyond the borders of your usual self. Picture yourself floating upward, like a soft cloud drifting over a vast landscape. As you do, notice how your sense of eye expands to include everything around you: the trees, the sky, the distant mountains, even the air moving around you. This isn't a conscious effort to change or control. It's more like opening a window wider so that the world can enter gently into your awareness. There's a natural unfolding, as if you're awakening to a larger field of presence, where you are no longer confined by the limits of your ego. Cast aside the idea that you are just your thoughts or feelings. Instead, see yourself as the space in which these things arise. Imagine that your awareness is like a vast, open sky, boundless and free. From this vantage point, you notice that the boundaries of your identity are like thin, fragile veils that can be lifted with each breath. As you continue to breathe and relax, sense that the illusion of separateness begins to loosen, revealing an interconnected fabric woven from countless threads of consciousness that extend far beyond your individual self. In this state, your sense of being enclosed by the small self dulls, replaced by an expanding feeling of unity and presence. Think about how everyday life can mirror this ongoing process. When you walk through a busy street or sit quietly in a garden, your awareness naturally shifts. Sometimes, you're caught in the details, the sounds, smells, and sensations, and sometimes you feel a broader sense of being part of everything around you. Practicing this visualization helps you cultivate a continuous awareness that isn't rooted solely in the ego but moves freely through the interconnectedness of all life. It's like opening a door to a larger, more expansive version of yourself that always exists, waiting just beyond the confines of the small, familiar self. Chapter 10. The Power of Presence, Living Beyond the Ego. Practicing mindful awareness in daily activities. Every day, we find ourselves swept up in the whirlwind of tasks and responsibilities, often missing the beauty woven into the mundane. Imagine washing your hands and feeling the warm water cascading over your skin, the gentle sensation awakening your senses. This simple act can become a doorway to a deeper awareness, allowing you to step outside the relentless chatter of your mind. When you transform routine activities into moments of mindful awareness, you create space for each experience to unfold fully. Mindfulness isn't about striving for perfection. It's about embracing the present moment with open arms and a soft heart. Picture cooking in your kitchen, surrounded by the aromas of fresh herbs and simmering spices. Instead of racing through the recipe, take a few moments to inhale deeply and let the scents transport you. Each chop of the knife and sizzle in the pan invites you to be fully awake in that moment, dissolving the ego's need for worry or distraction. Integrating mindfulness into everyday activities offers a gentle way to reconnect with yourself. One very effective practice is to focus on your breath while engaging in daily tasks. For instance, when making your morning coffee, pause for a moment and notice your breathing. Feel the air fill your lungs and the warmth of your cup in your hands. Allow this simple act to anchor you. In these fleeting moments, the worries of the day fade, leaving behind clarity and peace. While walking, whether to your car or around the block, pay attention to the rhythm of your feet against the pavement. Feel each step as it connects you with the earth. With each breath, feel the air around you, listen to the sounds that might pass unnoticed, the rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, or the distant hum of life moving about. This heightened awareness invites a compassionate presence that allows you to let go of expectations and just be. Over time, these practices can influence your overall state of being. Each act, whether it's brushing your teeth or standing in line at the grocery store, becomes a small retreat into mindfulness. When you slightly shift your focus from task completion to savoring the experience, you create a new habit of presence. Remember, the aim is not to quiet the mind but to become more aware of what is happening right now, melting the ego's hold and allowing life's beauty to flow freely into your consciousness. Finding ways to regularly insert mindful moments into your day can truly elevate your experience. The next time you're engaged in a simple task, ask yourself, how can I bring awareness to this moment? The gentle reminders to breathe deeply and fully can become your newfound companions. Allow them to guide you to a place where you can appreciate life's subtleties that often go unnoticed. Empower yourself to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, one breath at a time. The art of listening, reducing ego's need to be heard. There's a subtle tug beneath most conversations, one that's rarely spoken aloud, the ego's craving to be noticed, to have its voice dominate. This urge often dresses itself up as the desire to be understood or validated, but underneath, it's a longing for connection, a fear that unless we claim the spotlight, we risk fading into invisibility. When we talk, sometimes we're not just sharing our thoughts but trying to fill a silence inside ourselves, hoping someone will meet the parts of us that feel unseen. Yet, what if the true connection lies not in how loudly we speak, but in how deeply we listen? When we quiet that ego's clamor for attention, there's room for something more tender and real, a gentle meeting where souls recognize each other without the noise of competing voices. Listening, in its fullest form, isn't passive. It requires a shift from wanting to be heard to wanting to understand. When we listen with the intent to reply, the ego stays alert, waiting its turn, plotting the next sentence. But when we listen to truly hear, something softens inside. It's like the tension in a tight string suddenly loosens, and the space between words becomes alive with possibility. Silence takes on a new role, not as an awkward gap, but as a tender pause allowing thoughts and feelings to settle and unfold. Patience grows, and with it, this quiet openness offers an invitation to the other person to share not just facts, but the weight and colors of their inner world. Practicing genuine presence transforms interactions in unexpected ways. It demands a willingness to set aside our own script and step into the moment without judgment or anticipation. This can be uncomfortable at first because it means surrendering the power to control the conversation or steer it back to our own story. Yet, when we pause long enough to resist filling every silence, we discover how much richness awaits beneath the surface chatter. The ego's demand to be heard quiets, replaced by a curiosity that's less about winning and more about connecting. With each patient breath, the simple act of listening becomes a balm, soothing the restless parts of us that hunger for significance through speech alone. Try this. Next time you find yourself eager to jump in with your own thoughts, slow down and lean a little closer into the silence that fills the space. Notice how your body shifts, how your mind resists, and then, maybe, how it relaxes. Let your attention rest fully on the person speaking, their tone, their hesitation, the emotions flickering just beneath their words. This isn't about fixing, advising, or measuring the right response. It's about meeting the other person exactly where they are. Allow this simple practice to become a quiet ritual, tiny moments woven through your day where listening takes precedence over speaking. Over time, you might find that the ego's urge to be heard softens, replaced by the steady rhythm of authentic connection, where silence and speech dance together as equals. Embracing silence and stillness for ego detachment. Imagine a busy city street suddenly falling silent, the usual clatter and chatter vanishing into a calm hush. It's in moments like these that we realize silence can serve as a gentle yet powerful portal, one that quietly nudges the ego aside and opens a space where our deeper selves can emerge. Silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's a sacred gateway to unshackle ourselves from the relentless stories our minds tell. When we sit in stillness, free from distractions and outer chatter, we create room to notice how loud the ego's claims can be. It's often in this quiet space that the ego's voice begins to soften, revealing the fragile sense of self we've mistaken for truth. Moving into stillness feels like stepping back from the storm, giving us the chance to witness our thoughts without being swept away by them. Here, the ego's loudest claims lose their grip, and a gentle, honest presence begins to take their place. Holding space for silence allows us to see that the inner noise isn't an inevitable part of us but a passing phenomenon. When we practice quiet moments regularly, we start to notice how much the ego feeds on chaos and busyness. These moments act as pacifiers, calming the mind and diminishing the ego's need to be seen, validated, or defended. The more we sit quietly, the more we observe how easily our sense of worth rises and falls with external approval or internal reactions. By introducing even small periods of silence into our daily routine, whether during meditation, a quiet walk, or moments of stillness during the day, we give the ego a gentle nudge towards detachment. This doesn't mean silencing the mind completely, but rather creating a loving distance, allowing us to see the ego for what it is, an ever-evolving story, not the core of who we are. In this space, authentic presence begins to sparkle through, untainted by the ego's persistent claims. To truly nurture the habit of embracing silence, it can help to remember that stillness isn't a goal to reach but a space to inhabit. Life's busyness pulls us in different directions, but even amid noise, we can find pockets of quiet. This might mean taking a few deep breaths before responding in a conversation, or pausing often during the day to just notice what's happening inside. These small acts help create a rhythm where silence becomes familiar, not foreign. As we deepen our connection with stillness, we notice subtle shifts, less reactivity, more clarity, and a gentle release of attachment to the ego's stories. Over time, these quiet moments reveal the calm underneath the chaos, the steady presence that has been there all along, waiting patiently for us to simply listen. Like a mirror, silence reflects back our true nature, idle but always ready to be recognized. One simple tip to deepen this practice is to dedicate a few minutes each day to sit quietly, observing your breath without trying to change it. Let the breath be a gentle anchor that brings you back to the present whenever your mind wanders. Feel the sensation of air entering and leaving, noticing the stillness that exists between each inhale and exhale. When your mind chimes in with stories or judgments, gently acknowledge them and return to the breath. This simple act helps cultivate a natural stance of openness and reduces the ego's tendency to cling to identity or control. With patience and consistency, these moments of silence become a safe refuge, a place where the ego's claims lose their grip and the authentic self begins to shine through, unobstructed and free. Developing a habit of conscious presence. Conscious presence invites us to step away from the noise of our thoughts and into the here and now. It's about moving from the frantic, disjointed chatter of the mind to a more serene awareness, a place where we can experience life as it unfolds. Imagine standing in a busy marketplace, your mind racing with to-do lists, while all around you, vibrant colors, laughter, and scents weave together in a living tapestry. This is the difference between living on autopilot and engaging fully with the rich moments that comprise each day. When we embrace conscious presence, we begin to notice the subtleties of our existence. The warmth of sunlight on our skin, the sound of a child's laughter, or the taste of our morning coffee can transform from simple experiences into profound connections to the world around us. This gentle practice encourages us to listen, observe, and feel rather than to judge or analyze. It allows for a moment of stillness amid the chaos, gifting us the opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and our surroundings. Cultivating conscious presence doesn't require lengthy rituals or complex practices. Rather, it can bloom in the simplicity of our daily life. Start with small moments of mindfulness, such as pausing to appreciate the feel of the earth under your feet during a walk. Notice how the subtle shifts in temperature or the gentle rustle of leaves can ground you in the present. These minute details serve as stepping stones on your journey to awaken mindfulness. Consider weaving these practices into your daily routine. Perhaps while enjoying your morning tea, you can focus solely on the texture and flavor, letting distractions fade into the background. By instilling these mindful moments throughout the day, you nurture a habit of presence that will slowly reshape your relationship with the world. Each experience you engage with is an invitation into a more profound understanding of yourself and your surroundings. As you cultivate this gentle habit, remember that the key is acceptance. There will be days when your thoughts drift, or while practicing, you might find it hard to focus. Embrace those moments, too. They are part of the journey. With time and practice, you'll find that each moment you dedicate to conscious presence builds your connection to the life unfolding around you. Chapter 11. Building Inner Freedom Through Self-Realization. The journey from identification to awareness. Our minds have a curious habit of latching onto passing thoughts, feelings, and stories, mistaking these fleeting moments for who we truly are. It's easy to believe that the judgment we just made, the fear that crept in, or the happy memory we replay, somehow capture the essence of our being. Imagine a mirror covered with smudges. You see shapes and colors, but those marks aren't the mirror itself. Yet, we often fixate on these smudges, these thoughts, allowing them to define us. Over time, this creates an invisible cage, where we identify so strongly with the mind's chatter that the deeper self, the quiet observer beneath the noise, slips into the background. Psychology calls this the ego, a collection of roles, titles, and stories we tell ourselves. Sometimes it feels like a helpful guide, shaping our identity and keeping us safe. Other times, it acts like an overzealous character actor, amplifying fears or anxieties that aren't really ours to carry. Our sense of I becomes tangled in memories of success, failure, pain, and praise, making it difficult to recognize the unchanging presence that witnesses all of this without judgment. This confusion is like trying to hold water in a fist. The more tightly we clutch, the more it slips away, and yet we keep holding on because that illusion feels familiar. Yet, beneath these layers, there's a part that has never shifted, silent, steady, and untouched by passing moods or self-imposed labels. It helps to remember that the mind's stories are like clouds drifting across the sky. They move, they change shape, they sometimes hide the sun, but the sky itself remains vast and clear. When we mistake the clouds for the sky, we forget the freedom that comes from simply being the spaciousness around those thoughts. Identifying with transient experiences can feel like wearing someone else's clothes that don't quite fit. The moment we start shedding those layers, a different kind of clarity begins to emerge. Awakening into awareness doesn't require battling the ego or forcing it to vanish. Instead, it invites a gentle unraveling of the stories it clings to, like peeling back the petals of a flower to find the quiet heart within. This awareness softly steps back from the roles and labels, revealing a deeper self that has been present all along. Imagine standing on the shore, watching the waves rise and fall without trying to stop them. The waves are the ego's stories, the rising and falling of thoughts and emotions. You, the observer, remain steady, not swept away by the tide. This deeper self isn't carved from anything we can see or touch, but rather known through silence and stillness. It's less about who we think we are and more about the space in which who we are can simply be. The ego's narratives often shout for attention, convinced that our survival depends on their urgency. Yet, when we lean into quiet awareness, we discover these stories aren't the boss of us, they are passing guests at the feast of consciousness. This shift doesn't erase challenges or emotions, but it changes how we relate to them, allowing experience to flow freely without unnecessary resistance. To begin sensing this deeper dimension, one can start by noticing the gap between thoughts. Small pauses where the mind rests. These moments can be glimpses of a vastness beyond identity. Asking simple questions like who is aware of this feeling, or where was I before this thought arose, can open doorways into awareness. These are not interrogations but invitations to step out of the play and observe the stage itself. In everyday moments, this can mean pausing to feel the breath, to notice sensations without naming or fixing them, and to gently remind oneself that there is a place from which all experiences arise and then dissolve. Try this. When a strong emotion or thought arises, instead of immediately reacting or identifying with it, pause and observe. You might notice how the feeling has a shape or texture, a tempo or color, but it doesn't define your entire being. This simple practice opens a crack for awareness to enter, a glimpse of the unchanging self peeking through the clouds of the mind. Over time, these small acts of witnessing create a new habit, recognizing that you are not your stories, but the quiet presence in which they appear and disappear. Awareness is like a silent ocean beneath the restless waves of thought. It never clings, never judges, it simply is. You don't have to create it. It's always there, waiting to be remembered. When the mind relaxes its grip on identity, anxiety about the self softens, and a peaceful knowing emerges. This knowing isn't loud or flashy, but steady and inviting, reminding you that beyond all the masks we wear lies a simple truth. You are the space in which everything unfolds. Carry this with you as a subtle whisper throughout your day, a gentle anchor in moments of overwhelm or distraction. This light touch of awareness transforms ordinary life into something quietly profound. Distinguishing the self from ego. Practical clues. Every day, our mind is like a busy marketplace filled with buzzing thoughts, feelings, and stories we tell ourselves. Some of these whispers come from our deeper self, crafted from genuine experiences, values, and quiet strengths, while others are just the echo of our ego trying to shape how others see us or how we see ourselves. When we observe closely, certain signals start to emerge. For instance, notice how often you feel the need to prove yourself or defend your choices. Those moments might be nudges from the ego trying to inflate your sense of importance or cover insecurities. Conversely, when you feel calm, centered, or simply at peace without needing justification, it's often a sign of connection to something more authentic within you, beyond the noisy stories. Behavior also carries clues. Do you find yourself reacting strongly to criticism or praise? Does your mood swing based on how others perceive you? These reactions often trace back to the ego's desire to maintain certain images or gain approval. Meanwhile, subtle shifts like a quiet curiosity, genuine gratitude, or an acceptance of whatever comes your way may reveal your true self's quiet resilience and wisdom. Sometimes, it's as simple as noticing your body language. Leaning forward with openness versus pulling back with defensiveness can mirror whether you're anchored in your core or caught in ego's web of self-protection. These small signals are like signposts on a path, guiding us to distinguish the fleeting ego from the steady, unshakable core that remains constant through life's ups and downs. The key is to approach these clues with gentle curiosity rather than judgment. Take a moment each day, perhaps before bed or during a quiet walk, to reflect on your inner state. Ask yourself, when did I feel truly myself today? When did I feel like I was wearing a mask? Notice your emotional responses without clinging to them. Did certain thoughts come up when you felt threatened or insecure? Recognizing these patterns helps you see the ego's attempts to control or inflate your sense of self. Try practicing simple pauses throughout the day. When you notice a strong reaction, be it anger, shame, or pride, pause for a breath. Instead of acting immediately, ask, is this reaction coming from my true self or from my ego trying to defend itself? Over time, this pause becomes a habit, a quiet detective's tool to uncover whether your experience is rooted in genuine presence or ego's storytelling. Keep a small journal or even a mental note of these moments. With practice, you'll start noticing the difference more clearly and feel more drawn to what's real inside, rather than the stories your ego wants you to believe. Remember, the process isn't about perfect clarity overnight. It's about cultivating a gentle awareness, recognizing the masks as they appear and choosing to lean into your core self whenever possible. Think of yourself as a curious explorer, gradually peeling back layers of illusion to find what has always been there, your quiet, enduring essence. Pay attention to your breath, your body, the quality of your thoughts. They're all tools to help you see what's beneath the surface and recognize when the ego is speaking loudest. The role of self-inquiry in uncovering true nature. Self-inquiry serves as a gentle guide, inviting us to peer into the very essence of who we are. It acts like a mirror, reflecting not just our outer selves but also the hidden layers beneath the surface. Each question we ask ourselves has the potential to peel back a layer, revealing the authentic core that often lies shrouded beneath masks and stories we've come to identify with. We all wear these masks, constructed from our experiences, beliefs, and societal expectations. But with self-inquiry, we can start to see beyond them, uncovering the genuine self that thrives beneath the facade. The process often feels like entering a quiet room after being pushed and pulled in different directions our entire lives. The silence invites clarity that can feel both comforting and unsettling. Delving into self-inquiry means actively engaging with our thoughts and emotions. It could start with simple questions like, what do I truly want? Or what are my core beliefs? Over time, these inquiries can become deeper, prompting explorations into our fears, desires, and motivations. Each layer we investigate sheds light on what drives us, revealing not only our vulnerabilities but also our strengths. When we dare to sit with these questions, we begin to understand our true nature rather than relying on the stories we tell ourselves. This journey is less about finding definitive answers and more about cultivating a curiosity that leads us to insights, often giving rise to a sense of liberation. To turn self-inquiry into a consistent practice, it's helpful to approach it as a sacred dialogue rather than a chore. This means setting aside time to reflect, journal, or simply sit with our thoughts. Creating a ritual or safe space for this practice can profoundly change the way we connect with ourselves. Maybe you light a candle or find a favorite nook in your home where distractions are minimal. The aim is to cultivate an environment that feels supportive and nurturing. With a warm cup of tea in hand or the soft sound of nature around you, you can begin to converse with yourself in a more intimate way. Incorporating mindfulness techniques can deepen this journey. Mindfulness encourages us to become aware of our thoughts without judgment, allowing insights to arise naturally. When a thought bubbles up during your inquiry, pause and observe it. Ask yourself, where does this thought come from? Or is this idea genuinely mine, or is it borrowed from someone else? This practice not only reveals deeper insights but also liberates us from certain unhelpful beliefs. As you continue this path, you might find that self-inquiry becomes less intimidating and more of a joyous exploration. Each question can spark curiosity, shifting your mindset from one of obligation to one of wonder. Consider pairing self-inquiry with creative outlets like art, music, or writing. Creating without the pressure of outcome allows for a freer expression of your inner thoughts. You might draw a representation of your emotions, compose a piece of music that conveys your truth, or write poetry that distills your feelings into words. Each of these practices can enhance your self-inquiry, offering fresh perspectives and revelations. Remember, the goal is not to reach a final destination, but to engage in an ongoing dance of discovery that releases the burdens of surface-level identities. Before each inquiry session, take a moment to breathe deeply, grounding yourself in the present. This simple act centers your focus and opens your heart to the possibilities that await within. Approach yourself with compassion, and be patient with the pace of your discoveries. In this sacred exploration, you may just find an abundance of joy and insight awaiting you, echoing the truth that you are enough, just as you are. Living authentically, aligning actions with inner truth. Authenticity is not something you put on like a costume or switch on like a light. It's more like a quiet dance that happens between who you are inside and how you show up in the world. Your inner truth, the deep sense of what feels right, honest, and whole, whispers to you constantly, even in the busy noise of everyday life. When your outward actions follow that whisper, you create a harmony that feels natural and freeing. But when those two parts are out of step, it can feel like a tug-of-war. Something inside pulls one way while your behavior pulls another, leaving you unsettled and uneasy. Think of your authentic self as a river beneath the surface, moving steadily no matter what the weather looks like above. Sometimes waves and storms try to push that current in different directions, but the flow beneath continues quietly, seeking its own path. To live authentically means noticing where the water beneath your actions matches the river inside you. It means recognizing that authenticity is not a fixed destination but a living, breathing process, as fluid and changeable as water itself. It's the way your values, feelings, and choices gently curve and shape an honest expression of who you really are on any given day. Sometimes, the gap between how you feel inside and what you express outwardly isn't obvious. Maybe you smile to keep the peace when you want to speak up, or nod politely when your heart says no. These small moments where we bend ourselves quietly away from inner truth can pile up, creating a shadow that dims your energy and joy. The dance between inner truth and outward action requires attentiveness, a willingness to catch yourself when you're off beat, to pause and listen again, and to step back into yourself. This practice is a soft, ongoing conversation between your heart and the world, where each step matters. Bringing your life into clearer alignment with your inner truth often starts with simple shifts rather than grand overhauls. It's less about forcing change and more about making space for honesty in small, manageable ways. Being mindful during daily moments, pausing before responding, noticing where your body tightens or relaxes as you make choices, or simply naming the feelings inside, can help close the distance between knowing yourself and living that truth. Over time, these subtle acts create a new rhythm where your actions begin reflecting what you truly believe and feel, naturally and without strain. One quiet shift that can open this door is learning to be curious rather than judgmental about your own inconsistencies. Instead of beating yourself up for moments when you don't measure up to being authentic, try treating these moments as clues, signposts pointing to where your inner and outer selves need more dialogue. When you approach yourself with kindness and genuine curiosity, you create a safe space to welcome your truth more fully, flaws and all. Through this tenderness, you start noticing the small cracks where old habits, fears, or expectations creep in, giving you the chance to gently realign without pressure or perfection. The everyday practice of living authentically can also involve choosing to say no when no feels true, or yes when your spirit nudges you forward, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. It means trusting your intuition, even when the world around you pulls in another direction. Authentic living asks for courage, but the courage it asks for is quiet and humble, not loud or grandiose. It's found in the small moments when you admit to yourself, "This is what I need," or "This doesn't feel real for me." Those moments build an inner compass, gently guiding your steps toward a life that feels stitched together with your own voice and values. To keep the connection strong, consider creating simple daily reminders to check in with yourself. This could be as easy as asking 3 questions before making a choice. Does this feel right inside? What is my gut saying? Will this action honor who I want to be? These questions are like little doorways, inviting you to pause and reconnect when your mind wants to rush ahead. They also remind you that authenticity is less a perfect state and more an ongoing commitment to yourself, a commitment to show up honestly, even when it feels messy or uncertain. The practice of living authentically doesn't erase challenges or differences in opinion. Rather, it brings clarity to how you walk through them. It reshapes conflict not as something to be feared but as part of the dance, an invitation to hold space for yourself and others without losing your own voice. When actions arise from a genuine place, even disagreements crackle with possibility instead of frustration. You start to see your life as a story uniquely yours, written with strokes that carry your true colors instead of someone else's expectations. One practical way to bridge the gap between understanding your truth and living it is to cultivate quiet moments of reflection during the day. Whether that's a minute of stillness when you wake up, a breath before a meeting, or a pause while waiting in line, these pauses help you tune into your inner state. From that place of calm awareness, it becomes easier to notice when you're slipping into automatic patterns that don't serve you. Those moments are opportunities to shift your intention, aligning what you're about to do with who you want to be right now. Remember, aligning your actions to your inner truth is less about an endpoint and more about the gentle unfolding of self-awareness. Each step brings you closer to living with a quiet clarity that feels both peaceful and strong. It opens space for your unique light to shine, not by forcing it to burn brighter but by simply letting it be. When you move through your days this way, small acts of honesty ripple outward, shaping a life that is deeply yours. Chapter 12. Navigating Ego in Relationships. Recognizing ego in conflict and misunderstandings. When conflicts arise, the voice of the ego often hides behind a shield of defensiveness, making it tricky to see what's really happening. It whispers accusations, insists on being right, or dismisses the other person's feelings as wrong or unimportant. Sometimes, it even twists the story, blaming others or the world itself for our discomfort. This protective part of us wants to avoid feeling vulnerable or exposed, so it paints the conflict in black and white, casting the other as the enemy. The more we identify with these reactions, the less we see the bigger picture. We become blind to the deeper truths that could guide us toward understanding and compassion. In subtle ways, ego disguises itself through assumptions, overgeneralizations, and a need to win the argument. It's like a stream of noise in the background, keeping us firmly attached to our position. For example, we might think, "They're always unfair," or "I'm justified in feeling wronged," which sharpens our defenses and closes the door to empathy. Sometimes, we don't even realize that our need to be right feeds our pride more than it does the truth. This constant craving for validation makes us see the conflict as a threat to our identity, rather than an opportunity for growth. It's as if our ego is trying to protect a fragile image, one that, ironically, keeps us distant from understanding others' perspectives. Recognizing these ego-driven patterns begins with noticing how we interact during disagreements. Are we quick to assume the worst? Do we jump to conclusions without checking the facts? Do we insist on being heard, even when our words hurt instead of heal? Paying attention to our internal reactions is like shining a light into a dark corner. Suddenly, the illusion of control and righteousness begins to fade. By becoming aware of when our ego is speaking loudly, we create space for a calmer, more honest conversation. That little pause, a breath, a moment's hesitation, can sometimes be enough to see past our defenses. When we step back, we start to see that beneath the ego's bravado is a longing to be understood, to be accepted, just as we are. To deepen this awareness, try observing your reactions in conflicts without judgment. Notice if you quickly feel defensive or if your thoughts race to justify yourself. Reflect on whether your words are aimed at resolving the issue or protecting your image. Asking yourself simple questions like, "Am I responding out of my ego or out of genuine concern?" can be revealing. Sometimes, simply acknowledging, "Here comes my ego again," is enough to soften the grip of pride. Over time, this practice helps us see that conflicts are not battlegrounds for victory but opportunities to connect at a more genuine level, beyond the ego's stories and defenses. Recognizing ego in conflict isn't about judging ourselves but about gently unmasking the false layers that keep us apart. Practicing gentle awareness involves listening to your inner voice and observing your knee-jerk reactions. When you notice defensiveness, pause for a moment to check in. Ask yourself what you're afraid of losing: your sense of control, your image, your comfort. Often, the root of ego's push is fear, masked as pride or anger. Cultivating patience and compassion toward yourself first is like watering a seed of humility. Remember, no one is perfect. We all wear masks that hide our vulnerabilities. By becoming curious about the stories we tell ourselves in conflict, we can begin dismantling the ego's false armor, opening space for genuine understanding and shared growth. The goal isn't to eliminate ego entirely, that's impossible, but to see it clearly enough to not be blindsided by it. Practicing vulnerability without ego defenses. Vulnerability can feel like standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into the unknown. It's a daring act of trust that asks us to let go of our ego's tight grip and present our true selves, often without any protective armor. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we expose our authentic emotions, dreams, and fears. It's the willingness to lay bare our imperfections and uncertainties that makes vulnerability so powerful. The instinct to protect ourselves, to shield our hearts with defenses, is deeply ingrained. Yet, when we choose to set that aside, we open the door to genuine connection and understanding with others. This is where magic happens, in that honest sharing of hearts, where no one is pretending to be perfect. Practicing vulnerability involves a conscious effort to notice those ego defenses that arise. It's about being aware of when we start building walls to protect ourselves or when we put on a mask to hide our true feelings. Mindful awareness is key. Check in with yourself when you feel the urge to disengage or cover up your emotions. Are you trying to protect your image? Do you fear judgment, or worry that others won't understand? Recognizing these impulses is the first step toward loosening their hold. It allows you to approach your feelings with compassion rather than criticism, validating your right to feel what you feel without judgment. Creating safe spaces can significantly enhance your journey into vulnerability. Surround yourself with people who listen without judgment and create an atmosphere of warmth and understanding. This might be friends who empathize with your struggles, a support group, or even a therapist. Having people who can share in your discomfort while creating a safe haven gives you the confidence to express yourself honestly. Embrace the idea that discomfort is part of the process. It's through leaning into the awkward, uncertain moments of sharing that deeper connections can be forged. Sometimes, the most profound dialogues emerge when you speak your truth, even if it makes you a little uneasy. To practice vulnerability actively, start small. Share a personal story with a friend, express a genuine opinion in a group setting, or discuss a fear you hold. Notice the feelings that come up and how others respond. Their reactions can provide valuable insight into the beauty of open communication. As you become more acquainted with vulnerability, you'll likely find it becoming easier over time. When you embrace discomfort as a catalyst for connection, it transforms how you engage with others. Instead of viewing vulnerability as a weakness, see it as a courageous choice to show up fully alive. Approaching life with this mindset allows you to navigate relationships, deepening your ties with others in ways you might have never thought possible. Remember, vulnerability is not a destination but a journey, one that brings with it the promise of authentic connections. Creating healthy boundaries through self-awareness. Have you ever noticed how, in certain moments with people close to you, your reactions seem larger than the situation calls for? Maybe it's a sudden spike of anger, a tightening of the chest, or the urge to withdraw, all coming from somewhere inside that feels prickly, unsettled. This feeling often arises when the ego is at work, trying to protect itself, hold on tightly, or push others away to keep a safe distance. Recognizing these moments is the first step in creating healthy boundaries because they reveal where our inner lines have been crossed or blurred, even if the outside world doesn't quite show it. The ego's role is to keep things familiar, even if that familiarity means building walls out of fear or insecurity. Becoming aware of when your ego is trying to defend itself is like catching the shadow before it swallows the light. It gives you a chance to pause, to see those intense feelings not as enemies but as messengers signaling something deeper beneath the surface. When your ego clings to an idea of yourself or the world that doesn't serve your peace, it's usually defending against perceived threats to your value, identity, or freedom within relationships. This defensive posture often looks like insisting on being right, shutting down vulnerability, or reacting too harshly to small triggers. Inner clarity begins when you tune in and gently observe these ego reactions without judgment. Instead of labeling these impulses as bad or weak, Imagine them as weather patterns passing through the sky of your mind, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm. This kind of self-awareness creates space to choose how closely to hold onto these feelings or stories. When your boundaries come from this place of insight, they aren't brittle fences built from fear. They become compassionate statements about what you need to feel safe, seen, and respected in relation to others. Setting boundaries with clarity allows you to say no without guilt or yes without resentment, because the decision arises from knowing your own limits, not from reacting impulsively. Compassion plays a quiet but powerful role here. It softens the edges of boundaries by reminding you that both you and those around you are human beings carrying complex feelings and histories. Boundaries don't shut people out. Instead, they offer a framework where authentic connection can flourish without suffocating either side. When you hold boundaries gently yet firmly, it invites others to understand your inner world and encourages them to set their own boundaries too. It's like two dancers moving in harmony, each aware of the space they occupy and respecting the space the other needs to thrive. Reflecting on your patterns can reveal how much of your emotional pushing or pulling is really about your ego wanting to preserve a certain story about yourself, a story that might no longer fit your growth or peace. Ask yourself, when do I feel pressured to defend or prove myself? What conversations tend to leave me feeling depleted? How can I notice these moments earlier before the ego takes the wheel? Answering these questions is not about exposing flaws but about uncovering deeper truths that can guide healthier choices. The courage to face these questions with kindness is the beginning of freeing yourself from cycles where boundaries are either ignored or used as weapons. Imagine instead speaking your truth with calmness, allowing room for both your voice and the other person's experience. This creates an atmosphere where boundaries serve as bridges, not barriers. Practicing kindness toward yourself in this process turns boundary setting into an act of self-love rather than punishment or fear. It's a reminder that protecting your energy is not selfish, it's necessary for your well-being and meaningful relationships. One practical way to start is by spending a few minutes each day checking in with your feelings, especially after interactions that feel intense. Notice where your body tightens, where your thoughts spiral, or where you feel a sudden urge to withdraw or push back. Gently name these sensations and feelings as signals, not emergencies. When you can identify these moments early, you can choose how to respond rather than reacting automatically. Another helpful exercise is to practice saying boundary statements out loud, starting with simple phrases such as "I need a moment to think," or "I feel uncomfortable when." These sentences create clarity without shutting down dialogue. Over time, this builds confidence and trains your mind to honor your limits without fear of rejection or confrontation. Remember, healthy boundaries evolve through practice, self-compassion, and a willingness to stay present with discomfort. They are not about perfection but about being true to yourself in every relationship. As you navigate this path, your boundaries become a mirror reflecting your self-respect and inviting others to honor your presence fully. Fostering compassion and empathy beyond ego barriers. Many times, the biggest obstacle to feeling connected to others isn't necessarily their actions or words, but the invisible walls our ego builds around us. These walls are crafted from assumptions, judgments, fears, and the need to protect a fragile sense of self. When we see someone through the lens of our ego, we tend to interpret their behavior as a personal offense or a validation of our insecurities. We forget that beneath those judgments lies a shared humanity, a simple desire to be seen, heard, and understood. Recognizing these barriers is the first step. It's like noticing a cloud blocking the sun. Once aware, we can start to gently peel back the layers of separation, revealing the warmth of genuine connection that exists beyond our ego's self-protection. The path to opening the heart begins with conscious awareness, a mindful pause that invites us to question the automatic stories our mind tells about others. Instead of rushing to judge or defend ourselves, we learn to observe these reactions without buying into them. This act of witnessing creates space, a quiet pause where curiosity can bloom. We might ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? Or what story am I telling myself about this person? It isn't about suppressing emotions but rather about shining a gentle light on them, acknowledging their presence without letting them dominate. This practice helps us see beyond the ego's filters, allowing compassion to flicker in, softening the harshness of judgments and opening a wider window into human connection. In practical terms, each moment of awareness offers an opportunity to choose empathy over ego. When we notice ourselves reacting defensively or judging someone, we can pause and reflect, is this about them, or about my own fears and insecurities? This question can serve as a bridge, a reminder that behind every person's behavior is a complex mix of experiences, wounds, and hopes. By consistently practicing this awareness, we gradually loosen the grip of ego that makes the world seem black and white. We start to see shades of gray, and in doing so, nurture a sense of compassion that's rooted not in idealism but in a genuine recognition of shared vulnerability. The more we practice, the more effortless it becomes to view others with kindness, even when their actions challenge us. Chapter 13. Ego and Success. Balancing Achievement and Humility. Understanding the ego's role in ambition and achievement. The ego often plays a central role in our ambitions. It's that little voice in our heads that urges us to strive harder, to reach higher, and to prove ourselves. While ambition itself can be a driving force for success, it is the ego behind it that sometimes skews our motivations. The desire to achieve can easily morph into a quest for external validation. For example, a business professional might aim for a promotion not only for the fulfillment of the role but to receive the accolades that come with it. This subtle shift can create a chase after recognition, often leading to burnout or dissatisfaction despite reaching their goals. In this pursuit, the ego convinces us that our worth is tied to our achievements. We often find ourselves measuring success against society's standards or comparing ourselves with peers. This battle can create a cycle of wanting more status, more accolades, and more achievements, never truly feeling satisfied. Reflection on our motivations is crucial here. When we pause and ask ourselves why we want something, we begin to unravel the intricate web of our desires. This self-inquiry allows for a clearer understanding of whether we are chasing ambition for the joy it brings us or for the validation it offers others. Celebrating our achievements is essential, yet it requires balance. Recognizing our success without letting it inflate the ego can be a tricky dance. This is where humility enters the frame. Humility doesn't mean downplaying our accomplishments. Instead, it's about acknowledging them while also understanding that they do not define our entire being. Acknowledging our efforts with grace helps us stay grounded. When we can look at our achievements through a lens of self-awareness, we understand that success comes from various places: effort, opportunity, and, yes, sometimes luck. This balance fosters deeper connections with others. When we're open about our journey, including the struggles and flaws, we invite authenticity and relatability into our relationships. It dismantles the facade that perfection is necessary for acceptance. True fulfillment arises not from towering achievements shown on a resume but from knowing ourselves, embracing our imperfections, and sharing our stories. Practicing gratitude, for instance, can help shift focus from ego-driven achievements to recognizing the broader journey. Consider journaling about daily victories, big or small, to cultivate an appreciation for growth without the weight of external validation attached to it. The journey towards ambition can become richer and more satisfying when we merge our drive with self-awareness and humility. Aim to be proud of what you achieve, but remain mindful of how you feel about it internally. Every acknowledgement of success should remind you of who you are beyond your accomplishments. This alignment invites deeper satisfaction and a more profound understanding of yourself, fostering not only personal growth but also connections that are real and authentic. Avoiding ego traps in the pursuit of success. Success often feels like a shining beacon pulling us forward, but sometimes the very light that guides us casts shadows we can hardly see. The ego is a sly companion on this journey, often hiding in plain sight, draped in garments of confidence or achievement. At first, it may seem like self-assurance, the voice whispering, "You've earned this," or "You deserve this win." Yet, beneath that voice can lie a subtle trap. It's not the loud arrogance that grabs attention, but the quiet illusion that what we've accomplished defines our worth, making us vulnerable to losing sight of growth and connection. When success becomes too wrapped up in identity, it fences us inside expectations we feel compelled to meet. The ego starts shaping how we see ourselves and others, coloring interactions with pride that feels less like satisfaction and more like a shield. This protection feels needed, yet it can block out humility and curiosity. It's as if we've built a house so carefully that letting anyone in, or allowing ourselves to admit a misstep, feels like risking everything. The funny part is that this fortress was constructed around something that was initially meant to be freeing: confidence, and achievement. What makes these traps so difficult to spot is how natural they feel. When you receive praise or reach a milestone, it's normal to feel proud. The ego rides shotgun through these moments and may even enhance the thrill, but if left unchecked, it quietly starts whispering, "You're better than before," or "You've earned the right to relax." This insidious voice makes slowing down, questioning, or admitting uncertainty feel like failure rather than opportunity. Small moments of subtle arrogance, a dismissive glance, tuning out feedback, or inflating your role in a collaborative success, grow roots before you realize they're there. They don't announce themselves with drum rolls. Instead, they sneak in like a gentle breeze that, over time, shifts the whole course. The first step to bypassing these traps is gentleness, toward ourselves and our habits. Notice the difference between genuine confidence that invites more learning and the ego's version that shuts doors. A healthy confidence feels light, expansive, and often accompanied by a hunger for more, the echo of "What else can I learn?" In contrast, ego's confidence often feels heavy, as if carrying a mask that must never slip. Practicing mindful self-awareness helps paint clearer pictures of these distinctions, inviting a pause before reactions take over. Another practice is embracing vulnerability as a sign of strength rather than weakness. When you allow yourself to say, "I don't know," or "I made a mistake," you create cracks in the ego's armor. Those cracks let fresh air in, fostering authentic connections and deeper insights. This doesn't mean doubting your abilities constantly. It's about balancing pride in your achievements with an open heart and a curious mind. Real growth comes when success is seen not as a final destination but as an unfolding story, where every chapter, including moments of failure or humility, adds richness. Reflection becomes a sturdy ally here. Asking questions like, "Am I holding on to this achievement to feel worthy?" Or "Is my confidence inviting collaboration or shutting it down?" opens doorways to understanding how ego might be influencing choices. Surrounding yourself with honest feedback can also illuminate blind spots. Sometimes, those we trust see the ego's subtle footprints even before we do. Listening with intention, without defense, and allowing space for discomfort can transform ego traps into stepping stones for growth. In daily life, small shifts can pave the way. Before reacting to a compliment or a win, pause for a moment to witness your internal response. Is gratitude the first guest, or is it an urge to claim or protect that success? When a challenge arises, try changing the internal narrative. Instead of framing it as a threat to your status, view it as an invitation to stretch further. These practices slow down the momentum that ego builds and invite a clearer understanding of who you are beyond accomplishments and recognition. Here is a gentle exercise to start with. At the end of the day, reflect on one moment where you felt proud or confident. Write down what felt true and what felt like ego speaking. Was there need to control others' perceptions? Did a part of you resist feedback or differing opinions? Notice without judgment. This habit forms a mirror that shows both your strengths and your shadows, lighting a path toward a rooted self that moves through success without stumbling over ego's illusions. Success is not a trophy to clutch tightly, but a current to flow within effortlessly. When ego's traps loosen their hold, confidence becomes a quiet song, not a loud shout, and achievement feels like a dance, not a cage. This freedom invites you to keep growing, keep learning, and keep moving forward with both strength and grace. Cultivating humility and gratitude as counterbalances. When success arrives, it's easy to let pride swell and take the lead. The ego loves to roar, claiming victory and spotlight, often forgetting the threads of luck, help, and timing that pulled us there. But humility acts as a quiet anchor, steadying us when waves of accomplishment threaten to toss us into arrogance or complacency. It's not about downplaying our talents or accomplishments. Instead, it's recognizing that behind every achievement are unseen hands, shared efforts, and lessons learned. Viewing success as a dance, where humility keeps us grounded and grateful, creates space for genuine growth while keeping the ego from commandeering the stage. Gratitude, in its turn, is like a gentle wind that whispers, "You're part of something bigger," reminding us that what we have isn't solely the result of our effort but also a gift received. It softens the edges of ambition, weaving appreciation into the fabric of our pursuits. When gratitude sits at our core, it encourages us to honor others' contributions, to celebrate not just what we've gained but what others have shared with us. This doesn't mean denying ambition, but balancing it with a sense of appreciation that keeps us humble. As we invite gratitude into our daily routines, our victories become less about dominance and more about participation, a shared dance where everyone plays a role. Building humility and gratitude into everyday life starts with small, intentional steps. Simple acts like pausing before celebrating a milestone to reflect on those who've helped along the way can nurture humility. Keeping a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things each day that made us feel thankful, shifts focus from what we lack to what we have. Practicing mindful listening during conversations reminds us that we don't have all the answers, fostering a sense of humility in our interactions. Developing a habit of offering genuine compliments and acknowledging others' strengths can also deepen humility. Over time, these small daily actions become a part of who we are, shaping a mindset that values humility and gratitude even amid striving for more. Creating space for reflection helps reinforce these virtues. Setting aside a moment each evening to consider what went well and who contributed to that success encourages heartfelt gratitude and keeps ego in check. Engaging in gratitude meditations or breathing exercises can anchor these feelings deeper into our being. Remember, cultivating humility isn't about suppressing pride but making room for humility to grow naturally alongside confidence. Likewise, embracing gratitude isn't just about feeling thankful. It's about expressing it, recognizing others, and appreciating the subtle blessings woven into everyday life. When we make these practices regular, they become filters through which we see ourselves and others, transforming internal virtues into living habits. Integrating inner peace with outer accomplishments. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around you, your heart racing with the thrill of the view below. This powerful mix of excitement and trepidation mirrors the experience of achieving great success in life. The accolades, the applause, and the material rewards can feel intoxicating, much like that rush of adrenaline. Yet, beneath the surface lies a deeper truth. Genuine inner peace is what keeps us grounded amidst this whirlwind. While external achievements can elevate us momentarily, they can also create a frantic chase if not balanced with serenity. Inner peace is that quiet strength, the steady heartbeat in our chest, reminding us of who we are beyond our accolades. When we chase accomplishments relentlessly, it's easy to lose touch with ourselves. Stress builds, emotions fluctuate, and the joy of our successes becomes clouded by anxiety about the next target. In contrast, when we cultivate inner peace, we create a strong foundation that allows us to appreciate our achievements without becoming ensnared by them. We begin to see our successes as extensions of our authentic selves rather than measures of our worth. This mindset shift opens up a more expansive view of life, one where both peace and achievement coexist harmoniously. We learn to celebrate successes not just for their external markers but for how they resonate within us, nurturing our spirit. The journey towards inner tranquility involves conscious practices that keep us connected to our core values. One simple yet profound practice is gratitude. By regularly reflecting on what we appreciate in our lives, we remind ourselves of what truly matters. This practice anchors us, allowing us to recognize that our worth is inherent and not dictated by our latest achievements. Moments of gratitude can transform feelings of competition or envy into a celebration of community and shared joy. Another effective way to nurture inner peace is through mindfulness. Taking time to breathe deeply and remain present grounds us. It pulls us back from the chaos of unchecked ambition and reconnects us with our inner selves. Whether through meditation, nature walks, or simply sitting in silence with a cup of tea, these practices facilitate reflection. They allow us to honor our journey and recognize that life is about the entire experience, not just the finish line. Humility plays an equally critical role in our quest for serenity. When we recognize that every achievement is touched by the support of others, we cultivate a greater sense of connection and purpose. Sharing our journey, acknowledging those who helped us, and being open to learning fosters balance in our lives. It shifts our focus from individual success to collective upliftment, fostering an atmosphere of collaboration rather than competition. Incorporating these practices into daily life enriches our souls and enhances our experiences with success. They remind us that while we can soar high, our roots must remain firmly planted in the values and connections that truly matter. Striving for external accomplishments becomes a joyful dance rather than a race, allowing our true essence to shine brightly with every step we take. As you navigate your own path, Keep in mind that achieving inner peace is not a destination, but a continuous journey. Small changes in your daily routine can lead to profound shifts in perspective. Engage in a few minutes of reflection each day to cultivate gratitude, breathe with awareness, and honor both your accomplishments and those who support you. The balance of inner peace and external success will not only make your achievements more fulfilling but also elevate the spirit of those around you. Chapter 14. Advanced Practices for Ego Transformation. Shadow Work. Integrating Hidden Aspects for Wholeness. There's a part of each of us that tends to stay hidden, tucked away like a secret room inside our minds. It's not a mysterious chamber filled with ghosts, but rather a patchwork of feelings, fears, traits, and memories we've tucked out of sight because they made us uncomfortable, ashamed, or vulnerable. This hidden side, often called the shadow, influences our behavior, relationships, and even the way we see ourselves without us realizing it. It whispers through moments of irritation, sudden self-doubt, or emotional blocking. When we refuse to look at these hidden parts, they often grow louder, causing tension and inner fragmentation. Our shadow can include elements that don't fit the story we tell about ourselves, the anger we don't want to feel, the jealousy we deny, or the parts of our personality that seem too much or not enough. We push these parts aside to keep a tidy self-image or to fit into social expectations, but that act of hiding doesn't erase them. Instead, these parts linger in the shadows, shaping our reactions or causing patterns that we repeat without understanding why. Bringing these qualities into conscious awareness doesn't mean self-criticism or judgment. It means meeting these aspects with curiosity and care, allowing us to reclaim pieces of ourselves that have been lost or locked away. As the light of attention touches these unseen corners, something shifts. The fragmented self begins to feel more whole. Imagine your inner world like a deep ocean, where the bright surface is everything you know and show, and beneath lie waves churned by currents you don't always feel. To truly know yourself, to feel solid, grounded, or authentic, you must be willing to swim beneath that surface, not only skimming it. The shadow is part of that ocean's depths, and when you acknowledge what lies below, it can become a source of strength rather than something to fear. This is not about fixing or changing who you are, but about expanding your understanding so that your whole self can live in harmony. There is quiet freedom in recognizing the full story, with all its messy, complicated, and beautiful parts. Working with your shadow is more like making friends than battling an enemy. It calls for patience, kindness, and sometimes a bit of humor. When you meet these hidden aspects without judgment, you open a door that brings healing and insight. For example, if you notice recurring feelings of anger or jealousy, instead of pushing those feelings away, try to listen. Ask yourself what these emotions might be trying to tell you. Sometimes they point to unmet needs, fears, or boundaries that have been overlooked. By paying attention, you learn your shadow's language and discover what it truly represents behind the surface emotion. Small daily practices can help with this process. Keeping a journal where you write honestly about your reactions, dreams, and impulses helps you track patterns and see what your shadow might be communicating. Mindful observation, pausing to notice when you feel defensive, ashamed, or triggered, creates space to respond differently. Instead of acting out those reactions, you can explore their origins gently. Speaking these insights out loud, even in a private moment, can give voice to your shadow and make it less frightening or confusing. With time, you may find the qualities you once rejected becoming sources of creativity, empathy, or courage, hidden gifts wrapped in difficult emotions or traits. Sometimes, the shadow shows itself in the way we judge others, especially when we judge harshly. These moments can be mirrors, reflecting parts of ourselves we aren't fully aware of yet. Noticing what irritates or unsettles you in another person can offer clues about your own unintegrated feelings or fears. When you pause before reacting, you create an opportunity for transformation. That flashing irritation or resentment, when reflected upon, often reveals a doorway into healing old wounds or embracing parts of yourself that have been labeled as wrong or weak. Integration means welcoming these aspects with the same compassion you would offer a friend. This act of acceptance softens inner conflict and expands your sense of wholeness. One way to practice integration is through creative expression. Painting, writing, movement, or any activity that opens a channel between your conscious mind and your deeper self. These outlets allow the shadow to speak in metaphor and symbol, bypassing critical thinking and opening fresh perspectives. You might start seeing what once felt like flaws in a new light, as unique aspects of your complexity that enrich your life rather than diminish it. Shadow work is never about perfection. It is about wholeness. When you invite the shadow to dance alongside your brighter sides, your inner world becomes richer and more textured, full of unexpected strength and wisdom. Try this when an unsettling feeling rises. Pause, breathe, and imagine that feeling has a color or shape. What does it look like, and what might it want to share with you? Treat it like a curious visitor rather than a threat. This simple act can change your relationship with the shadow and start a profound dialogue within you. The shadow may be hidden, but it is never truly lost. It waits to be met, known, and embraced. Ego and non-attachment. Cultivating detachment with love. Imagine holding a fragile butterfly in your hands. You want to keep it safe, yet you know that grasping too tightly will harm it. Releasing attachment to outcomes is a lot like that delicate act. It's about loving what happens, yet not clinging to a specific result. When we tie ourselves so tightly to how we think things should turn out, we create a barrier between ourselves and the natural flow of life. True detachment isn't cold or distant. It's a gentle act of caring deeply without needing to control. It's trusting that, just like the butterfly, things will unfold as they are meant to, and loving them in the process. Many of us confuse attachment with love, thinking that caring means holding on. But this often leads to frustration and disappointment, especially when life doesn't go according to plan. The root of healthy detachment lies in understanding that outcomes are outside our control. We can influence, nurture, and put our heart into things, but we cannot dictate every twist and turn. Recognizing this difference transforms the way we experience life. It turns love into a free, liberating act rather than a heavy anchor that pulls us into misery whenever things don't go our way. When we serve love and care at the core of our actions without obsessing over the final result, something shifts. We begin to notice that genuine care doesn't diminish as the outcome changes. Instead, it deepens. This kind of love accepts loss, uncertainty, and change as part of the process. We learn to love without clutching, to hold without squeezing too tightly. In doing so, we allow ourselves to experience life's richness fully. The more we practice releasing attachment, the more we realize how much our peace and happiness are rooted in our relationship with ourselves and our capacity to love with an open heart, not in the results we seek. One simple step is to remind yourself that love, at its core, isn't about control. When you catch yourself clinging to an outcome, pause and ask, am I trying to control this because I love it or because I'm afraid of losing it? Letting go of fears helps you to love more freely. Practicing mindfulness in everyday life, paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and urges, creates space to see where attachment is lingering. As you become more aware of these moments, you can gently steer your attention back to the present, where love lives in acceptance rather than expectations. Embracing the flow of life involves trusting that things will unfold in their own time. Imagine surrendering like a leaf floating downstream, trusting the current rather than fighting against it. You might set your intentions, then release the need to control how they will manifest. Trust that life, with all its surprises, is supporting your growth even if you don't see it in the moment. Developing trust takes practice. Small acts of surrender, like releasing a worry or letting go of an attachment for a day, gradually build a resilient sense that love can thrive without grasping tightly. The practice of mindful surrender can also include simple daily rituals. For example, when facing a challenge, take a deep breath, acknowledge your feelings, and consciously release any need to force a specific outcome. Say inwardly, I trust life's timing, or I love this regardless of the result. These affirmations plant seeds of acceptance and ease into your subconscious. Over time, these small acts of gentle surrender cultivate a sense of freedom, allowing love to flow openly, unburdened by the weight of expectation. Think of surrender as a gentle act of loving trust, nurturing your ability to care deeply without feeling trapped or anxious about the what ifs that come with outcomes. Contemplative exercises for deep ego insight. Begin by finding a serene spot where you can sit quietly without interruption. Allow yourself to relax, taking a few deep breaths to settle into the moment. As you sit there, focus on your mind's whispers. Notice the thoughts and judgments that come to the surface, recognizing that these are not you, but fleeting visitors in the landscape of your consciousness. Acknowledge them without attachment, simply observe how they arise and dissipate like clouds drifting across the sky. This exercise of deep observation cultivates a gentle awareness, encouraging you to regard each thought as a passing phenomenon rather than an established truth. As you continue to observe, engage in mindful questioning. Ask yourself, who is the experiencer behind these thoughts? This question acts like a key, unlocking doors to a broader understanding of your identity. It nudges you to reconsider what you may have taken for granted, the idea of a fixed, permanent self. Rather than clinging to your thoughts and identifying with them, allow yourself to feel that spacious awareness that exists beyond your ego. Picture yourself as an endless ocean, and the thoughts are merely waves. They rise and fall, but you, your deeper essence, remain constant and vast. Use this realization to cultivate a sense of liberation. Each judgment or thought you observe is an opportunity to understand and dissolve the illusion of an unyielding ego. To deepen your insight, try integrating this practice into your daily life. Each time you catch yourself in a moment of judgment or self-critique, pause and reflect. What thought is echoing in your mind? Rather than immediately reacting, take a breath and return to that initial question, who is the experiencer? By doing this, you start to change your relationship with your thoughts, moving from identification to observation. This shift lays the groundwork for a more profound understanding of your ego, allowing you to cultivate compassion for yourself and others. In this journey, remember that the path is not about perfection but rather about being open and curious toward the layers of your inner world. Keep practicing these exercises with patience. Over time, you'll develop a deeper insight into your own nature and the dance of your ego, leading to a more peaceful existence and a kinder heart. Creating a personal ritual for sustained ego awareness. Imagine this ritual as a gentle invitation to pause, a quiet breath between the rushing moments when your mind races ahead or clings to old stories. It's not about grand gestures or lengthy practices, but finding a simple, reliable way to reconnect with a deeper part of yourself beyond the chatter. Whether it's the first sip of morning tea, the touch of your feet on the ground before stepping out the door, or a few intentional breaths as you settle into your body, these small habits create cracks in the armor of the ego. Through these cracks, a kind of spaciousness appears, allowing a quiet presence to emerge without judgment or urgency. It's like tuning a musical instrument daily to keep its sound true. The regularity of returning to this moment of self-awareness adjusts the pitch of your inner dialogue, making room for insight and calm. Instead of reacting automatically to your thoughts or feelings, you cultivate a space where you can notice them, name them, and let them pass without dragging you into old patterns. Over time, this simple pause develops into a bridge that carries you above the turbulence of ego-driven fears or desires, helping you respond from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. The practice doesn't aim to silence the ego. It's more like befriending it, learning to listen carefully while gently holding it so it doesn't lead the dance of your life. Think of this personal ritual as a daily tune-up for your awareness, a moment where you check in with yourself little by little. The key is consistency rather than complexity. It's the tiny moments that accumulate, like drops of water carving smooth edges over time. You might notice that certain triggers surface during these pauses: fear of not being enough, urgency to prove something, or the habitual need to control the outcome. With gentle curiosity, you can observe these feelings without rushing to fix or argue with them. Simply noticing the ego's patterns without feeding them is often enough to loosen their grip. This ritual acts like a mirror, reflecting your inner world back to you with kindness, allowing you to witness how often the ego tries to steal the spotlight and how easily it can be invited to step aside. Engaging in such a ritual doesn't require special tools or philosophies. It is accessible anywhere: a breath in the car before a meeting, a hand placed over your heart while waiting in line, a few moments spent watching the sky during a break. These moments serve as anchors, moments that tether you to the present. When the ego's voice rises too loudly, remembering these anchors can ground you quickly, inviting you to observe the surge rather than be swept away by it. Over time, you might even find that the ritual becomes a ritual because it feels so nourishing, like a quiet conversation with a wise old friend who listens without judgment and asks simply, "Who are you beyond your thoughts today?" Once this connection to ego awareness begins to unfold, the daily ritual can expand into deeper territories. It can invite you to ask questions that peel back layers of identity, such as, what part of me is afraid right now? Or is this my true self or a familiar mask? This ongoing inquiry doesn't seek immediate answers or solutions, but thrives in the space of openness and willingness to watch your mind without getting tangled in its stories. Here, curiosity becomes a gentle spotlight illuminating the ego's tricks, shining light on habitual patterns that often run unnoticed. As the ritual deepens, you might notice moments when your usual reactive habits soften naturally, replaced by pauses born from a quiet strength that doesn't need to prove itself. Bringing this ritual into your life holds a kind of subtle power, the power to shift how you relate to yourself and others. When your ego softens, so too does the urge to defend, judge, or control. Instead, a more spacious way of being takes its place, one that welcomes all parts of your experience, even the messy or uncomfortable ones. This doesn't mean ignoring challenges or pretending everything is fine. Rather, it means meeting yourself honestly with kindness and steady attention. The ritual becomes a touchstone both for inner peace and for engaging with life's complexities without losing your center. The more you practice this habit, the more it becomes part of your rhythm, an inner compass that helps you navigate moments when the ego tries to pull you off course. To start, try this simple invitation. Before stepping into any activity, pause for even a few seconds and take a slow, deep breath. Feel your feet touching the ground, your body resting in space. Notice what thoughts or emotions arise without pushing them away or chasing after them. Ask yourself quietly, what am I feeling right now? What story is my ego trying to tell me? Allow these questions to hang gently in your awareness. You don't need to answer them fully, simply being present with them shifts the energy. Gradually, this small habit will become a pocket of calm within your day, a place where ego softens and your true presence shines a little brighter. Chapter 15. Living as the Witness, Embodying the Transcendent Self. Cultivating the witness mind, observing without judgment. Imagine sitting outside on a clear day, watching clouds float lazily across the sky. They come and go, sometimes big and fluffy, other times light and wispy. They have no need to judge or hold onto what they are, they simply exist in movement. Our minds can be like those clouds, observing the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that pass through us without grabbing hold or pushing them away. When we begin to see ourselves as that open sky, we start to notice how much of our daily experience is shaped by reactions and labels that we attach to what we notice. Instead of being caught up in the stories we tell ourselves about our feelings or circumstances, we learn to see them as passing phenomena, not our problem. This shift in perspective creates space, a quiet, spacious place where awareness can rest, unburdened by judgment or urgency. Seeing ourselves as a witness rather than the actor in each event is like observing a play without getting emotionally involved. It's about tuning into that gentle, steady presence that just observes, without trying to change things or make sense of everything right away. When the mind is flooded with reactions, criticism, desire, fear, it can seem overwhelming. But the witness mind acts like a calm mountain, standing firm amidst the storm and watching the clouds drift by. It invites us to notice that thoughts and feelings are temporary, not intrinsic to who we are. This simple realization becomes a gateway to compassion and patience, both for ourselves and others. Over time, it grows into a natural habit, seeing life as it unfolds, moment by moment, with gentle curiosity and without judgment. In practical terms, cultivating the witness mind begins with small moments. Take a few breaths and gently remind yourself, I am simply observing. It's like stepping back from the chaos and watching from a distance, without trying to fix or interpret. As you go about your day, try to pause periodically and check in with what's happening inside and outside. Notice your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, but don't try to change them. Just acknowledge, there's a thought, or I feel tension, and then let it be. With consistent practice, this habit creates a spaciousness where reactions lose their grip, and neutrality becomes the default. Over time, your mind learns to relax into this state, cultivating patience and kindness that aren't contingent on how things are going. Another way to nurture this habit is to establish daily moments of silent observation. This might be as simple as sitting quietly for 5 minutes, watching your breath or the rhythm of your body. When your mind wanders, and it will, gently bring it back to the observing point, like a shepherd guiding lost sheep. This repeated act of tuning into the present keeps you connected to the witness within. It's a gentle reminder that life isn't happening to you. It's happening through you, as a continuous flow of experience. An open, spacious mind begins to feel like a safe harbor, where all emotions and thoughts can arrive and then leave without causing disruption or damage. Developing a habit of non-judgmental observation is also about cultivating curiosity. Instead of labeling a feeling as good or bad, simply ask, "What is this feeling telling me?" Or "Where in the body do I feel tension or ease?" This act of curiosity keeps you centered rather than pushing or resisting what arises. Over time, this approach transforms reactive tendencies into compassionate understanding, creating a gentle internal environment. It's as if you're training your mind to become a wise, steady companion, forever witnessing, never condemning. Regularly practicing this kind of mindful observation gently rewires your relationship with experience, transforming a habit of judgment into one of gentle acceptance and awareness. Aligning daily life with inner stillness. Life often feels like a whirlwind, pulling us in a dozen different directions at once. Yet, within this chaos, it's possible to find anchors that connect us to our inner stillness. Daily routines, those seemingly mundane tasks we often overlook, can serve as gentle reminders of who we truly are. For instance, your morning cup of tea or coffee can be transformed into a sacred ritual. Instead of rushing through this moment, allow yourself to savor the scents and warmth. Feel the heat of the cup in your hands, listen to the sound of water boiling, and really engage with the flavors. This small moment of mindfulness can ground you in the present, nudging aside the noise of the day ahead. Consider how other simple routines, like brushing your teeth or washing your hands, can provide similar opportunities. As you engage in these actions, focus on the sensations, the minty freshness of toothpaste, the coolness of water. By practicing presence during everyday moments, you cultivate a deeper connection to yourself, providing a steady refuge amid life's ups and downs. Even when stress creeps in, these routines can remind you to pause, steady your breath, and recenter. Cultivating a sense of inner peace doesn't require grand gestures. It's often found in the subtleties of daily life. Adopting simple rituals can transform ordinary moments into rituals of connection and alignment. One effective method is to create a daily gratitude practice. This could be as simple as reflecting on 3 things you are thankful for each morning or evening. This practice shifts your focus from what's missing to what is present in your life, subtly nudging you into appreciation. Another transformative approach is to incorporate short mindfulness breaks throughout your day. Set a timer for just 5 minutes every couple of hours. During these breaks, close your eyes, take deep breaths, and observe any sensations in your body without judgment. Allow thoughts to come and go like clouds in the sky. These moments won't erase your busy schedule, but they can provide small yet powerful points of stillness, and in this simplicity lies the potential for deeper alignment with your true self. Keep in mind that the journey toward inner calm is ongoing. Every moment is an opportunity to reconnect. As you build these practices into your life, draw on the experience of sacredness in small details, from the rustling leaves outside to the echo of laughter among friends. The ordinary can become extraordinary when seen through the lens of presence and connection. Let your daily experiences be a mirror reflecting the stillness within. To begin today, choose one small ritual to start incorporating into your daily routine. It could be lighting a candle before meals, taking a moment to breathe deeply before responding to a challenging email, or simply choosing to notice the colors of nature during your walk. These seemingly simple actions hold the power to cultivate the peace you seek. The joy of being, experiencing life beyond ego. Have you ever noticed how joy that comes from something simple, a warm breeze on your skin or the laughter of a child, feels different from the kind of happiness tied to achievements or recognition? That lighter, softer joy drifts beyond the walls we build around ourselves with labels, stories, and the constant chatter of who we think we are. It isn't a jewel we clutch, but more like the sky itself, vast, open, and unconfined. When we step away from the ego, that voice inside that insists on defining everything by roles, opinions, or comparisons, we find a space that isn't crowded with me and mine. It's a state of being that doesn't peg reality into neat boxes but welcomes everything as it is, without judgment or need for control. This joyful state blossoms from simply existing without the constant filter of self-identity. Imagine standing beside a river, watching the water flow without needing to hold on to it, name it, or make sense of it. The joy here is like that river's movement, alive, present, and effortless. This feeling doesn't demand that you prove your worth or perform to gain approval. Instead, it offers a quiet, steady pulse beneath the noise of everyday life. Psychologists describe this as a flow state or moments of peak experience, where the sense of separate self dissolves into something bigger but not overwhelming. Spiritual teachers have described it as the joy of presence, a reminder that we are the sky itself, not just the passing clouds. When ego subsides, the boundaries that separate you from others become softer. People aren't strangers or competitors with agendas, but fellow travelers sharing similar threads of longing, fear, and wonder. This subtle shift expands our compassion and openness, allowing us to move through life with a gentleness that feels like floating rather than pushing. The joy here is not high or sharp. It's less a burst of excitement and more a deep, humming contentment. It's the kind of joy that doesn't ride on luck or circumstance but remains steady even when life tosses challenges in our direction. Moving into this joyful state isn't about suddenly becoming perfect or erasing all parts of ourselves. It's about learning how to soften the grip of the ego's grip and open to what's already here. One way to sink into the pure experience of being is to slow down and pay attention to simple sensations. The feel of your breath, the tilt of your body in your chair, the sounds around you without judging or naming them. These moments are invitations to step outside the endless loop of thoughts that assign meaning to everything and instead just witness what is happening. Immersing ourselves in being also means allowing emotions and sensations to move naturally without trying to fix or avoid them. When you feel anxious or restless, imagine sitting beside those feelings with kindness, like you would with a good friend who's struggling. This doesn't mean getting lost in the emotion or pushing it away, but holding it gently in awareness. In doing so, the ego's habit of resistance begins to soften, and a deeper ease surfaces. Activities like mindful walking, gentle stretching, or simply watching clouds drift by can serve as practical ways to reorient toward presence rather than thought. Another doorway opens when we release the pressure of needing life to look or feel a certain way. Instead of grasping for happiness or chasing after accomplishments that may never satisfy, we learn to catch the flickers of joy that happen naturally, the smile on a stranger's face, the color of a sunset, the quiet rhythm of your own heartbeat. This practice creates space where life's effortless beauty expresses itself through us, without strings attached. Some find this through meditation, others in creative expression or moments of stillness in nature. The key is not to force or strive, but to soften, listen, and allow. Try this. Pause for a moment right now. Feel the weight of your body supported by whatever it rests on. Take 3 slow breaths, noticing the rise and fall of your chest or belly. With each breath out, imagine releasing a little of the need to control or define yourself at this moment. See if you can simply be with yourself as you are, no labels, no stories, just presence. This small practice, folded into your daily life, can ripple outward, helping the joy of being grow stronger and more accessible, long after the breath has passed. A final reflection: embracing the eternal now. Consider the fleeting nature of now, how it slips through your fingers every moment, yet within its brief stay it holds the entire universe. The present isn't just a snapshot in time, it's a vast, endless canvas where life continually unfolds. When you pause and truly notice it, you see that each moment is both a fleeting whisper and an eternal whisper, whispering stories that don't belong to any one person or event. It can be easy to get caught up in thinking about the past or worrying about the future, but the real magic exists right here, in this very breath and beat. These moments, although seemingly small, form what becomes the vast tapestry of your life, woven with threads of now, shimmering with infinite possibility. Understanding the depths of this is like realizing that life is a wave, sometimes crashing, sometimes gentle, yet always part of the same flowing ocean. The present is the water itself, not separate from what came before or what is yet to come. It's an endless dance where the line between inside and outside dissolves. When you look at it this way, the moment transforms into a portal, an always present space where time slows down enough to feel its fullness. In that space, you see that nothing is really lost or gained. It's all just happening within the eternal now, the vast, unchanging witness of your life. When you begin to notice this, the rush and noise of everyday life soften into a gentle hum, revealing a quiet, steady presence beneath it all. Living in this awareness asks us to shift from constantly chasing after what is gone or anxiously reaching for what hasn't happened yet. Instead, it invites us to settle into the rhythm of now, appreciating its innate richness. Imagine each moment like a seed, alive with potential, waiting to blossom into the full beauty of awareness. Roots stretch deep into eternity, while the flower blooms for a moment that is forever alive. Recognizing this helps us see that each experience, no matter how small, adds depth to the ongoing story of life. When you cultivate this appreciation, you find that the present isn't something to be endured or escaped. It's where everything happens, where life breathes and expands in its purest form. To truly embrace the here and now feels like discovering a secret garden within yourself, the place where time's grip loosens and a sense of spaciousness awakens. It's like stepping out of a busy street into an open field, feeling the wide sky overhead. In that space, you realize that you are not your thoughts or your worries but an observer, watching the river of life flow past. Each thought becomes a cloud floating by, each emotion a wave washing over the shore. When you step back and watch this unfold without judgment, the boundaries of self dissolve, revealing a seamless flow of awareness that connects everything. This is where freedom begins, the awareness of being the current itself, not the boat that's riding it. Practically, inviting this awareness into your daily life can be surprisingly simple. Start small, take a moment to pause before each breath, feeling the air fill your lungs and noticing how your body responds. Allow your attention to rest there, in the present moment, without rushing to label or judge. When thoughts drift away to past regrets or future worries, gently guide your focus back to the breath or a simple sensation, such as the touch of your feet on the ground. Over time, this practice can help you see that the timeless, flowing essence of now is always accessible. It's like returning home to yourself, where peace and perspective naturally reside. The more you welcome this awareness, the more the boundaries between self and world fade, revealing the simple truth: everything is one ongoing dance of being, happening now, in this very breath. Ultimately, embracing the eternal now isn't about changing anything outside. It's about letting go of the illusion that time defines us. It's about waking up to the fact that life is living through us the whole time. When you recognize this, each day becomes a sacred gift, each moment a chance to reconnect with that vast, quiet presence. It's not something to be grasped or achieved. It reveals itself in the act of noticing. So, give yourself permission to simply be here, fully, gently, now, because in that simple act, you find everything you've been longing for, tucked into the timeless fabric of the present moment. Thank you for meeting yourself. If you've made it this far, then you've already proven something important. You are willing to look, to pause, to question, to turn inward instead of outward. And that's rare. Most people spend their lives chasing the next validation, the next success, the next shield to hide behind, never realizing that what they were looking for was already inside them. I want to thank you for walking with me through this exploration of the ego, not as a villain to be slayed, but as a part of us to be understood. The ego wears masks, it builds walls, it shouts when it feels unheard. But when you slow down and listen beneath all of that, what you discover is something softer, a desire to be safe, to be loved, to belong. And here's the beautiful paradox: the more you stop fighting your ego, the less control it has over you. The more compassion you bring to it, the more space you create for presence, peace, and connection. This book, written and published by Mindful Literary, is just a companion, but the real work, the real magic, happens in your everyday moments. The awkward silence in a conversation. The swell of pride when you want to prove yourself. The voice of doubt that says you're not enough. Those are the invitations. That's where you practice. So as you turn this final page, my invitation is simple: notice. Notice the ego when it shows up, smile at it like an old friend, and then remember that you are so much more than it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to see yourself more clearly. And thank you, most of all, for reminding me, and reminding yourself, that the ego was never the enemy. It was just the beginning of the path back to you.